Good evening. The January 2nd, 2018 meeting of the Anne Arundel County Council is now in session. I ask you to please stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Mr. Smith will lead the invocation.
Thank you. Let's bow our head. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for another day, another year. We are just grateful for the new year that each and every one is here to be witness to. We ask for your wisdom as we deliberate on legislation and budget items that affect our county and our citizens that live here. We ask you to continue to watch over those who are deployed in harm's way that protect our nation and our country and this way of life that we live and we cherish. Amen. We also ask you to pray for those who are struggling with addictions. Dear Father, we just thank you. Just put your hands over their hearts and their minds to fight for them and to continue to let them know that their lives matter. And all these things we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ladies and gentlemen, again, welcome. We have many people here this evening that wish to be heard, and we wish to hear everyone. So we will try our best to act with dispatch, and we ask you to follow our instructions and follow our rules. So we thank you in advance for your cooperation. We'll now, Madam Secretary, please read the ethics statement.
The Ethics Commission has asked that I advise you that under certain circumstances, members of the public may qualify as lobbyists when they testify before the County Council. If so, the law requires that certain information be filed with the Ethics Commission. The Chairman of the Ethics Commission has asked that those present review the Ethics Commission information in the foyer of these chambers. If there are any questions about lobbying requirements, speakers should contact the Ethics Commission in the Heritage Office Complex on Riva Road.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We will now invite members of the audience who signed up before the meeting to address the Council briefly on any subject not included on the printed agenda, and the remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. I have just 3 persons signed up here, so let me just call those names: Mr. Adrian Fair, Tim Kingston, and Anthony Brent. We have 3 extra chairs. If there's anybody else who would like to weigh in, you can come down now. We have 1, 2, 3 chairs, I think, available. Okay. So we'll begin. Mr. Fair, 2 minutes. Please, name and address, please. Mr. Fair, let me ask you to remain seated if you don't mind, please.
I need to stand up.
Mr. Fair, I'm going to ask you to remain seated. I'm going to ask everybody to remain seated. Thank you. Thanks for your cooperation.
Councilman Grasso, Councilman Fink, Councilor Tate, Chairman Peruka, Councilman Peruski, Councilman Trumbauer, Councilman Walker, Auditor Dickinson, Madam Secretary, for conduct unbecoming of this chamber, unbecoming of this council, unbecoming of a gentleman, I would like to apologize to you all, and I ask you to forgive me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fair. Mr. Kingston, name and address, please.
Greetings all. My name is Timothy Kingston. I'm the president of AFSCME Local 2563. I also hold the position of executive board member for the Maryland State GOP. First, I want to say to all of you, you're all duly elected officials. You represent your districts that you were elected in, and you were elected, every one of you, by the citizens of this county. Gentlemen, what I witnessed at the last council meeting was shocking. These meetings are a place for official county government business. Your time, my time, our time is limited and important. In my opinion, the last meeting was a blatant outreach by a small group of people trying to make a political statement. Anne Arundel County Council meetings are not the correct forum to conduct this type of political action. Gentlemen, because of the shouting out, making comments while and attacking our council members, by making noise when other people were testifying, by persons standing and blocking the views of other individuals, with all this in mind, I would request that one of you make a motion to enforce Article 4-106 of the County Code. I would further request that this article be read and handed out so the citizens here attending these meetings are aware of the rules and to be held responsible for their actions. I would ask that everyone be held equally accountable. We have important business to do here in the county, and let's get it done. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Mr. Kingston. Thank you very much. Mr. Brent, good evening.
Good evening. Councilman, I'm going to make this short and sweet. I'm here as Anthony Brent, Edgewater, Maryland,
Right.
on the Mayo Peninsula.
Thank you.
A lot of you have heard me before. I'm here to support the APFO's change to 95%. I think with the amendment that was submitted last week, it was
Mr. Brent, can I ask you to address any other subject you'd like, but we actually have a public hearing on that tonight.
Oh.
So that would be the appropriate time to address that.
I've already spoken on this matter at another time.
Okay, but
It's eligible for vote tonight. It's not up for a hearing, so he needs
Correct.
to wait. It's not in order to talk about a bill that's on the
yes, sir. I'm sorry, but it's not in order to talk about that particular matter
Okay.
thank Thank you.
No problem.
But anything else you'd like to discuss?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much for your cooperation. Mr. Lancaster?
Yes, I'm Spiro Lancaster. I live at 1188 Bacon Ridge Road, and I want to thank you for your comments. Well put. I left here the last meeting quite befuddled, and I've never seen anything like this in my life, and I'm 84 years old, so I've been to a lot of meetings. And it's just un-American to attack people and to think that you have the right to come in and tell me who I'm to befriend or not. You know, I might be friends with somebody that you don't think much of, and that's your opinion, and you have a right to that. But you don't have the right to interfere with my official function as a councilman and come in here and take up an hour, like you said, the time. And I got thinking on the way home, where is this coming from? And I thought to myself, I'd heard somewhere on the radio or newspaper about this Antifa. And I go home and I got on my Google, Antifa, and this is what these people do. They come in. Portland, Oregon had to have 2 months behind closed doors, the county councilman. They couldn't conduct their official business that they were elected to do. The Department of Home Security and the FBI is now putting some of these people on the terrorist list because they are terrorists. They're coming in, browbeating, bullying, talking to people like they are nothing. And, you know, I'm sure that if you knew all my friends, you would approve of all of them, maybe not even most of them. But again, this is still America. We still pledge allegiance to the flag. And we do have justice and liberty for all. And I do appreciate this, and I hope that we keep this in mind going forward. We have rights, and they're well spelled out in the Constitution, thank goodness. Our forefathers were brilliant people. They were geniuses. But we don't have the right to interfere with legal functioning of government for no reason other than just to be harassing and to stop it from happening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lancaster. Is there anybody else?
Thank you.
Seeing the movement, is there any item that any council member would like to place on the agenda? May I have a motion that the partial reading of any bill, resolution, or minutes constitutes a reading of the whole?
So moved. Second.
Madam Secretary, please read the minutes of December 18th, 2017.
The meeting was called to order by Chairman Michael Peruka at 7 p.m. and opened with the invocation given by Mr. Walker, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
May I have a motion to approve the minutes of December 18th, 2017?
So moved, Mr. Chair. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The minutes of December 18th, 2017 stand approved as read. Madam Secretary, please read the title of the bills to be introduced this evening.
Bill number 118, an ordinance concerning current expense budget, Board of Education supplementary appropriation.
Due to outside counsel that's here this evening, may I have a motion to suspend the rules to hear and vote on bill?
I think we have a resolution.
Excuse me, Madam Secretary, please read the title of the resolution to be introduced this evening. I'm sorry.
Resolution number 118, resolution concerning a petition to the Maryland Higher Education Commission for Anne Arundel Community College funding.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Now, due to outside counsel here this evening, may I have a motion to suspend the rules to hear and vote on Bill 9517 out of order?
So moved, Mr. Second.
Madam Secretary, would you call the roll?
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Grasso?
Aye.
Mr. Fink?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer?
Aye.
Mr. Walker?
Aye.
Mr. Pruka?
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Motion to suspend the rules to hear and vote on Bill 9517 is passed.
Very well, Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 9517.
Bill number 9517, an ordinance concerning Anne Arundel County Employee Retirement Savings Plan. And my apologies, the motion was to vote on it out of order as hearing has been concluded.
Good evening.
Good evening,
Mr. Marzick?
Bernie Marzick in the County Executive's Office. With me at the table is Nancy Duden, County Attorney, John Hammond from the Budget Office, Andy Rhodes from Personnel. We also have with us Barry Downey, Outside Tax Counsel, and Tom Lumen and Chris Sheets, who are actuaries for the county. I know the hearing was concluded on this. I would like to put, I was not at the last hearing, but would like to put on the record that I am one of the employees who would potentially be impacted by this legislation, just to have that on the record. We'll be offering the amendments at the appropriate time.
Okay, before the amendment, is there any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Excuse me, Mr. Pruski.
I just had a question because I went back and read the budget statement, and I already have my concerns on the record. But my understanding that the purpose of this is to help supervisors, managers, people with certain technology for job positions and other things. Did we ever consider just doing a carve-out for non-represented folks? Was that any discussion at the table? I'm just curious on why we're choosing everyone, and why wouldn't we start somewhere to see if it works?
Not that I'm aware of, but I'll defer to Mr. Hammond. I think the idea was to give this benefit to anyone who wanted to have the opportunity.
And it's voluntary choice on the part of the employee.
Okay, no, I understand, but I'm saying, was there any discussion when this was rolling out that why don't we try non-represented units? Because one of the arguments that we got from the pension oversight is that maybe this is a negotiated item. I'm not sure the legal, item on that, but I'm just asking in terms of.
You mean like how you negotiated the public safety tax credit?
Well, that's your discussion. I'm focusing on this bill and this bill only. Was there any discussion about a certain group, or was it always every employee? That's what I'm asking. I didn't write the bill, so.
We met with the 3 unions that are affected by this bill, and we got agreement from those 3 to actually that testified in support of it. When we decided which group of employees to go with, we went with an effective date. So we didn't keep represented out and only non-represented. We didn't want it to look like we were choosing some employees over others. We just went with an effective date, and any employee that chose to go in the employee's plan, it would be a voluntary decision.
Thank you.
Mr. Pruski, the only thing I would add to that is because it's voluntary, it is not a negotiated item. If there were ever an attempt in the future to make it mandatory, at that point it would have to be negotiated. But because it's voluntary, it's not an item for negotiation.
And it was made pretty clear by the administration, unless they change, that this is not going to be mandatory.
That's correct.
So I think that question was answered. Thank you, though.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Hammond, you're quick-witted. I'm scared of you. I'm still recovering from that last comment.
Many people think I'm only 50% witty.
This is an easy one. So how many employees do we anticipate taking advantage of this program? Is there any assumptions that we...
We really don't know, Councilman Smith. We know there's approximately 500 employees that may be eligible. I believe of that 500, about 39 that were hired after the date that we've established transferred in enough service time that they are already invested, so they would not be able to transfer in. But we really don't know because we haven't started any, publications or education until we got the legislation through.
Sure. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody? Any other discussion, any other questions? Hearing none, I understand there are amendments. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 1.
Amendment number 1. This amendment makes employees with a one-time irrevocable option at the time of hire to elect to become participants in the employee's retirement plan eligible to participate in the employee's retirement savings plan.
Motion to adopt?
So move.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Administration?
I think the explanation of the bill is self-explanatory, of this amendment is self-explanatory. It makes it clear that it's a one-time irrevocable option.
Okay, any questions? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 1.
Mr. Smith? Mr. Grasso?
Aye.
Mr. Fink?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer?
Aye.
Mr. Walker?
Aye.
Mr. Pruka?
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 1 is adopted.
Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 2.
Amendment number 2. This amendment modifies the definition of savings plan service to include the employee's credited service in any Anne Arundel County pension plan.
Thank you, Mr. Marzick. Oh, excuse me. Motion to adopt? I'm sorry.
So moved, Mr. Chair. Second.
Can we do this?
Thank you. Mr. Marzick?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Hammond on the amendments.
Mr. Hammond?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This makes it clear that the service that someone would be, if they're going to transfer from the employee's pension plan into this, that they would get credit for that time of service also, has implications as far as the vesting of the employer contribution as far as the savings plan is concerned.
Any discussion?
Mr.
Mr. Trumbauer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Hammond, was this originally the intent, and it's just a clarification, or is this something that you guys discovered might be an issue, and so this is an addition?
I think this is more of a clarification, but I'll stand corrected.
Councilman Trumbauer, this was always the way we intended
Okay.
the bill, so
Okay.
that the credit service would count.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anything else? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 2.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Grasso?
Aye.
Mr. Fink?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer?
Aye.
Mr. Walker?
Aye.
Mr. Pruka?
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 2 is adopted.
Very well, Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 3.
This amendment provides that upon transfer from the employee's retirement plan into the employee's retirement savings plan, the actuarial value of the transferring employee's benefit in the employee's retirement plan as of June 30, 2018, shall be transferred into the employee retirement savings plan, but in no event will the transferred amount be less than the employee's contributions to the employee's retirement plan plus credited interest of 4.25%. This amendment also provides that any employee contributions into the employee's retirement plan after July 1, 2018, plus interest of 4.25%, will be transferred into the employee retirement savings plan, and that the county will contribute 8% of the transferring employee's compensation after July 1, 2018, to the employee retirement savings plan.
Very well, thank you. Do I have a motion to adopt?
So moved, Mr. Chair. Second.
Mr. Marzick?
Mr. Hammond.
Mr. Hammond, excuse me. Sorry, Mr. Hammond.
And I certainly will defer to the actuaries who are also here tonight. But what this amendment does is spells out in detail how the employee and employer contributions would be transferred over to the retirement savings plan if they voluntarily made that choice. And it's designed to not have an impact on the existing retirement plan, to be cost neutral to the retirement plan, so that the value of what is being transferred out of the retirement plan is, from the employer standpoint, is no greater or no less than what the retirement plan has exposed or put into the plan to the date of the transfer.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to give the auditor an opportunity. Did you did you have a chance to look at this? And, I mean, anything actuarial, and there's a lot of percentages in here, and I just want to make sure you're okay with this one.
Yes, I have had a chance to look at this, not the detail behind the numbers, but I did look at the concept behind it. If you remember, the bill is written so that if somebody transfers 8%, the employer will give them 8% of all of their salary that they've had since they started here. And this makes it so, and I was pointing out in the last blue letter that this group of people that can transfer, they're actually less expensive for us than 8%. And by moving 8% out of the current plan and into the new plan, actually leaves the current pension plan with the higher cost employees. So they went at it another way and came up with a way of calculating how much cash will be moved from the employer's side for these people that could transfer, which makes it equal to what their current benefit really is. I don't know if I made that any clearer or not.
Mr. Chair, so this amendment protects the county, or it protects the existing plan.
Pension plan, yes.
But it doesn't, I mean, but it doesn't negatively impact the people that might opt to be in the new one?
Right. It will still provide them with contributions, but I think the conclusion was that we were transferring too much for this group with 8%, and the number should have been the percent should have been somewhat lower.
Yeah.
This way of calculating it actually gets at the cost of each individual who transfers.
Okay.
What have they earned to date? What's the present value of what they've earned to date? And they're going to transfer that amount over.
So you like this amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
But again, I haven't checked the numbers that are all behind it yet.
I understand.
So.
Okay. But certainly, if we amend this bill and we have another hearing, you would be able to report back.
Yes, I'll have more in the blue letter on the details.
Thank you.
Mr. Trumbauer, if I could, at a minimum, the amount that the employee has contributed into the pension plan plus the 4.25% interest would be transferred under this amendment. And the concept of the present value is whatever the present value of that benefit, which would be the liability in the pension plan, would be transferred over. So the liability would not be part of the pension plan anymore. It would be transferred, the funds would be transferred over to offset that exchange. And the employee would, again, be no worse off from their contribution standpoint.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anything further in the discussion? Madam Secretary, would you then please call the roll on Amendment 3?
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Grasso?
Aye.
Mr. Fink?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer?
Aye.
Mr. Walker?
Aye.
Mr. Pruka?
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 3 is adopted.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Would you please read Amendment number 4?
Amendment number 4. This amendment clarifies that non-vested members of the Employees Retirement Plan are eligible to participate in the Employee Retirement Savings Plan if they are not deemed ineligible under Section 66103B.
May I have a motion to adopt?
So moved. Second.
Mr. Hammond?
Yeah, this amendment basically says that if you're eligible in the employee's retirement plan, the pension plan, and you're not vested, then you can be eligible to make the choice to go into the employee's savings plan.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond. Mr. Walker?
Thank you. Mr. Hammond, does that, I know we had talked in the last meeting about a date specific to those that were eligible to participate in the new plan. Does this mean that if somebody's not vested, as an example, but their date of employment is prior to that date that we discussed, which I think was 2014, does that mean that they're now eligible? Or maybe I'm just not, I don't have 66103B in front of me, so what am I confused on?
Well, the answer to your question is no. The date of July the date of December 1, 2014 is the date that is
Hard and fast.
determined. If you were employed before that
that,
date, you're not eligible. If you're employed after that date, you're eligible to transfer into the employee savings plan.
So why would this amendment be necessary then if we already
Because-
established a date specific?
This amendment is necessary because in the bill as originally drafted, it excluded groups of employees, and this amendment undoes those exclusions.
But it still limits it to December 1, 2014.
Right.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Anything else? Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll on Amendment 4?
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Grasso?
Aye.
Mr. Fink?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer?
Aye.
Mr. Walker?
Aye.
Mr. Peruka?
Aye.
7 to the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 4 is adopted.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Will you please read Amendment number 5?
Amendment number 5. This amendment allows the personnel officer to enter into an agreement with a private party to provide investment services and to act as third-party plan administrator.
May I have a motion to adopt?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Mr. Hammond?
Yeah, the bill as written says the county could employ a third party to provide the administrative services and offer the investment choices. This amendment just says that the personnel officer can negotiate with a third party to do that.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Pruski, excuse me.
Yeah. Again, I need some clarification on this amendment. This does not require the county to do a bid, am I correct? For a third-party administrator, this basically, if we pass this amendment, it allows the personnel officer to go and agree with any private party for whatever price. As written.
That's correct, but under our existing procurement law, this would not require a bid anyway because this is a professional services agreement, so this is similar to hiring outside counsel or something along those lines where we're not required to get bids. We are able to explore the best options for those professional services.
But we could bid.
If that's what the personnel officer thought would be useful, but
We did go out on bid, Councilman Pruski, for T. Rowe Price for the 457B, and they won that award, and that's who we're choosing to use to administer this program as well. So originally, there was a bid. But we could go out on bid. If we decided 5 years from now we wanted to go out on bid, we could certainly do that.
Correct.
No, and I totally understand. I guess my issue is that the language in this versus the bid from the T. Rowe Price, I'm not sure if it's congruent. I just have a concern that there may need language in here that we would maybe go out for an RFP or bid. I'm just asking you to consider that.
No, legally, we don't need that language in here because, again, this professional services don't require RFPs or going out for a bid, so that's already covered under Article 8, and this is simply clarifying that the personnel officer can go out and negotiate.
I understand that. I guess what I'm saying is I would prefer a bid. That's all I'm saying. And I don't know if, you talk about that and consider it. I understand you don't have to. The point that I'm making, if we're going to a third-party administrator and some private party is going to be negotiating, and we lay out the specs, I mean, we do it in, when I was negotiating contracts in the construction industry, we did the same thing, and then you have it go out. I realize that you don't have to. My point is, I think we should, because we get the best bang for the buck if you lay out the specs correctly, and I know there's been other counties that have done that. So that's what I'm just asking, the admin would look at that as far as consideration.
And as written legally, what it means is that decision would be up to the personnel officer.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pruski. Mr. Walker, I think was next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to sort of, I was going down the same line of questioning I think that Mr. Pruski was. So we did already send it out to bid prior to the bill being introduced?
No, for the 457, the deferred compensation is T. Rowe Price, and we went out on bid to get T. Rowe Price to administer that program. Yeah, several years ago when we implemented the 457.
So is your intent to go out on bid on this one, or are you following what Mrs. Duden's saying is you don't have to?
We've
and therefore
actually-
you're just going to select someone?
We're actually going to do a sole source with T. Rowe Price, and we've had that approved by the purchasing agent. because we don't really have any idea what the numbers of employees look like. So it would be really kind of hard to go out with a bid and speculate on how many people might take advantage of it. Plus the fact that we have all the IT connections currently existing with T. Rowe Price. We've just done, at this point, a sole source to start this program.
IT connections being like
The
employee
transfer
access
of
to
money
the
back
employee.
and forth, yes, or that sort of thing.
Got it, okay.
And the plans, you know, the employees they know about T. Rowe Price, they know about the investment options.
Mhm.
So be very similar to what they see today.
And how often do you feel like that would need to be looked at? I mean, the only concern I have is somebody's used to dealing with a certain organization, like let's say we choose T. Rowe Price, but then next year you decide, well, we're just going to pick somebody else. And then you've got people moving their money around, and now there's they got to make changes. And I mean, you anticipate going out on this on a regular basis, or is it sort of a one-time shot and you feel like that'll do it for a couple of years?
I don't think we've really looked at that at this point.
Okay.
What
All right,
what I would say is that the option remains there if we got a few years down the road and it was decided that the current vendor was not efficient or because of the numbers of people that participated, but there is no requirement to bid that out at this point. So again, it's entirely up to the personnel officer and his or her analysis of how this plays out once we see how many employees sign up.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience, Mr.
Chair.
Trumbauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm intrigued by this because, so you guys said it's kind of like when we would go out and get outside counsel. I guess the difference there is there's 7 of us, so we kind of have a vetting process. Like we need 4 of us to agree on anything, right? And so what I'm concerned about is just on the abstract level, the complete power is left with the personnel officer, and what controls or vetting is built into that. And certainly we're not projecting any, malfeasance or anything. I'm just wondering, is there any oversight or is there anything that can assure the council or the employees that there's some due diligence to pick this vendor?
I apologize for being misleading, but I was really referring to when the administration goes for outside counsel.
I probably misheard.
So under Article 8, currently, right now, there are certain professional services that don't require bids.
Yeah.
And those are things like outside counsel, engineers, architects, consultants for various things. And this would be one of them. So Ms. Rhodes used the term sole source, but it's a professional services sole source.
Yeah.
The oversight there is that the agency decides that they want to use a certain vendor. They have to then justify in writing to the purchasing agent why they want to use that vendor, and the purchasing agent has to approve that. And then it has to be signed off on by the Office of Law and the CAO. So there is a certain amount of, it's not that the personnel officer would do it, sign the contract, and it would be done. She would decide who she wants. She would explain that to the purchasing agent. The purchasing agent would do his or her due diligence and do an approval, and then it would come back to be reviewed by the Office of Law and the controller before it went to the CAO for signature.
And the purchasing agent is a merit employee.
The purchasing agent is a merit employee. That's correct.
So in that, thank you for laying out the process, because I didn't understand that. So in this scenario, if the personnel officer decided to pick Grasso Industries, right, and then their procurement, I wanted to see if you were awake, and the procurement officer then takes that and says, oh, Grasso Industries, whatever, they were just formed 6 months ago and they've never done work like this, then how would they stop that? Would they just reject it and then?
That's correct. They would reject it, and then the department would have to look for somebody else. And that, while perhaps not a perfect system, that is the system we have under Article 8 in the Charter, and it works very well. And
I know. I guess what just makes this a little different is this is managing employees' investments, and I want to have like an extra level of security there. So I wasn't really thinking about this until Mr. Pruski brought it up, so I'm just a little conflicted.
Not to embarrass them or put any pressure on them, but it's the exact same process we have to hire Barry Downey to be our tax counsel, to hire these gentlemen back here to be our actuaries, to hire Bill Henn to be our bond counsel. You know, it's the exact same process. And again, there are enough steps in place, and at some point, I guess you have to say, we trust people to do their job, but that's the process.
And maybe Mr. Downey can weigh in on here, because I think there are certainly probably some fiduciary responsibilities that come with this decision-making on the part of the personnel officer.
That's right, there would be, and there'd be review regularly, I think, on the fees, the services being provided compared to the other fees and services in the market. So that type of review, for example, making decisions on what investment options are available, there'd also be a review of how T. Rowe is doing compared to the market on fees and services. Correct. From a fiduciary standpoint.
Mr. Smith.
So what happens, just, and this is just playing devil's advocate, what happens if this provision didn't pass? Does it prevent the implementation of this measure going forward or executing it? I mean, is something, does this tool allow you to, I mean, does this tool prevent you from properly administrating it if you didn't have this authority?
It leaves it very vague, because what this does is explain that the personnel officer will be the one with the initial authority here, and if it weren't to pass, in my opinion, it could still be done under our existing purchasing laws, but it would not be clear who was supposed to initiate that process, and it's best to have it clarified that it's the personnel officer, because that is the office that will be doing the constant reviews of the costs and expenses and how many employees are signing up. You know, down the road, if this didn't pass, it could be initiated by the CAO or somebody, but it's best to have it clarified that it's the personnel officer that would do this and would have the responsibility for those reviews.
So in a scenario now, without it being in law, who executes it? I know there's no clarity, but if, in your opinion, who would be the one to facilitate this program or this process without this provision?
I think it would still be the personnel officer, because he or she would see what is needed and would say, I need to reach out to these people, and would still have to jump through the same hoops of justifying it to the purchasing agent and having it go up the chain of command. But this just clarifies that, rather than letting it get lost in the shuffle, that this is a codified responsibility of the personnel officer.
Okay. All right, thank you. I'm still a little uncomfortable. I don't know, maybe just because of language in the sort of summary portion of it that allows the sole agreement, and similar to the concerns that were raised earlier, but it's just a little uneasy. Maybe I'm just uneducated on the whole process as it currently is done, and I'm one of those individuals that sort of throws caution to the wind and sort of, it's easier to come back and add than it is to take away. So that's where I'm at on this particular one. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Foster, I mean, Ms. Jody Foster, right?
I wish it was.
I can't believe I said that. Madam Auditor.
Yes.
Wow.
I still am not clear as to why we need to do this. I still don't see, you say we have the ability to do this through the purchasing article. Are there any other places in the code where we, in a separate article, give purchasing responsibility to somebody? I mean, to me, the personnel officer would be in charge of this contract because it's tied to the office personnel and pensions and savings plans. So I still don't get it.
Yes, for instance, if the administration wants to hire outside counsel, such as Mr. Downey, Bill Henn, our telecommunications counsel, the county attorney is the only person who has purchasing power in that area. And this is similar to that, just saying that who is the person who has to initiate this, just like the county attorney initiates outside counsel, even if it's for
Okay,
some
and where does it
departments.
spelled out that the county attorney is the only one that can hire outside counsel? Is that in another
In the
article?
charter.
In the charter?
Yes.
Is there any other place in the code where we've spelled out that some department is responsible for a certain contract?
Nothing that I can point to, but
Yeah.
I haven't done a
Yeah,
search.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I still think if it's a, I don't know.
Thank you. Anything further? Madam Secretary, would you then please call the roll on amendment number 5?
Mr. Smith.
Nay at the moment.
Mr. Grasso.
Aye.
Mr. Fink. Mr. Pruski.
No.
Mr. Trumbauer.
No.
Mr. Walker.
No.
Mr. Pruka.
Aye.
3 in the affirmative, 4 in the negative. Amendment number 5 is defeated.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Would you please read the title of amendment number 6? Please read amendment number 6.
Amendment number 6. This amendment allows funds to be transferred out of the employee's retirement plan and into the employee retirement savings plan if an employee elects to transfer out of the employee's retirement plan into the employee's retirement savings plan.
Thank you. May I have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Thank you. Mr. Hammond.
Yeah, this particular amendment would amend the retirement plan, the employee's retirement plan, to give the authority that the funds could be transferred from the retirement plan over to the savings plan.
Okay. Any discussion, anything further? Nothing? Then, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 6.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Grasso.
Aye.
Mr. Fink.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Aye.
Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Pruka.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 6 is adopted.
Thank you. Bill number 9517, as amended, will be heard on January 16, 2018. Madam Secretary, thank you, folks. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 9217, as amended.
Bill number 9217 is amended. An ordinance concerning subdivision and development, adequate public facilities, school utilization chart.
Thank you. Mr. Grasso?
Well, just for some of the folks that aren't familiar with what's going on here, most of us are probably tired about hearing it. Excuse me. Basically, what this legislation is currently in today's law, a developer turns around and puts a development together. They do a 3-year study to see the occupancy of the schools that are going to be affected by the development. And currently, the way the law is today, that if it's 100% or less, they will let a development go forward, no matter how big the development is. Councilman Smith is dealing with the situation in his area where his schools are closed, and I believe they're building 1,400 houses up there by Cedar Cemetery up towards Brooklyn, and there's no mention of a school or land or anything, and if you figure two children per household, you're probably talking 2,600, 2,800 kids, and the schools are already overcrowded. They're already reached their maximum amount. But the way our law is, if it's 100% or less, just one student under, they will let that development move forward. And if the development holds off 6 years, even if the system is closed, let's say they're one person over the 100%, if the school system is closed for 6 years, the developers can still move forward, even though they know they're going to cause a problem. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. So what I asked the council to do is I put a bill together at 95%. Basically what it's saying is when they do a 3-year study out, they look at the capacity of the schools, and instead of it being at 100%, it has to be at 95% or less for a development to move forward. All right, so if you're talking a 500 capacity elementary school, you're going to save basically 25 seats. This is not the silver bullet or the answer to the problem. It's just to give a little bit of cushion, because what can happen with my bill also is even though if the developer is at 95% or less and builds a development like in Pete Smith's area, he or she is going to blow that number completely out of the school. So this is just like the first step in what I like to call part 2, which is coming right behind this, is another legislation where it physically actually counts the seats that are available. And my second bill that's coming down the pike will require the development to count the seats of what they're going to put into our school system and to look at the schools that are going to be affected with it and to make sure that there's school capacity before that development can move forward. Now, of course, if the developer wants to hold off for 6 years, they can still move forward. I understand the case was litigated in law or in the courts, and it's basically telling people that we can't tell them that they can't develop. I've never said to anybody that you shouldn't have the right to develop. But my philosophy has always been and always will be is that when you develop your property, it should be in harmony with the people that you surround. And that's the way my stand has always been. So the 95% is just providing a little bit of cushion. I don't think it's going to give anybody really any heart gas over here. And hopefully the council will approve it favorably, and that's where we're at.
Thank you, Mr. Grasso. Administration, Mr. Marzick.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, we've talked about this bill for several meetings, but we have 2 amendments that will be offered at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you very much. We will then now open up the public hearing. I'm sorry, were there any other discussion? I will open up the public hearing then. I believe we only have one name signed up, Mr. Kachikar. I hope I said that correctly.
Yes, close enough.
That's an exquisite tie you have on there, sir.
Thank you. I dressed to impress.
Is there anybody else that would like to testify? There are empty seats, so please come down at this time, please. Thank you. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Is my mic on? Great.
Name and address, 2 minutes.
Okay. Again, my name is Raj Kachadkar. I'm at 8385 Piney Orchard Parkway, Odenton. I am the president and CEO of the Central Maryland Chamber. As a chamber president, I am focused on making sure we are adequately planning for future growth in order to maintain a high quality of life in Anne Arundel County. But tonight, I'm speaking to you as a planner. As a former deputy director of planning and zoning for Howard County, the issue of adequate public facilities fell directly underneath me. As a result, I truly appreciate that Anne Arundel County must maintain adequate public facilities, especially to remain attractive to families and businesses. That being said, I'm not here to speak for or against 9217, only to state that the next year of the general development plan will be important in relation to this bill. I apologize, I think my microphone's going in and out. Okay, can you still hear me? All right, hopefully you can give me an extra 15 seconds. Let me conclude by sharing some eye-opening facts and figures. Last year, Anne Arundel County and Howard County had 9 of the top 10 schools in our region based on SAT scores. However, all top 5 schools happen to be in Howard County. For perspective, while Howard County was achieving that laudable goal, it had absolutely no caps on high schools. I hope this sheds light on the fact that simply reducing caps on schools is no panacea. In conclusion, I look forward to working with the council, administration, planning and zoning, and the community over the next year to implement the best general development plan that sets a comprehensive vision for the county moving forward.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your remarks. Would the rest of you just please make sure that you sign up with Madam Secretary. Ma'am, can we begin with you?
Sure.
Name and address.
My name's Jennifer Davis. My address is 615 Emerson Place. The reason I'm here today is, once again, I'm here to talk about the intersection of development and schools. And once again, I'm woefully unprepared. I'd like to thank Mr. Grasso for presenting this, and I agree with everything you said, which is very rare. It's just very rare that I agree with a politician with the idea that this is not a solution, and it really is a first step. And it needs to be a first step. I walk into my daughter's classroom. She's in 5th grade at Oak Hill Elementary. And I don't see where there is room for another desk. I don't see where there is room for another bus to fit in the bus circle. The capacity is simply not there. That said, a couple years ago when I really got on my stick with the intersection of development and schools, I started doing research into the projected numbers that the Board of Education was laying forth. And what I found was there was not one year, never, where the estimated number of students was overestimated. You know, like if there were 100 students, they were not saying, oh, there's going to be 110 students. It was always, there's going to be 85 students. So there's an issue there that I see, and it's a consistent issue. So I would also ask that in the future when you're drafting things to bring, that you take a look at the way the Board of Education, the actuaries are compiling their numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Mr. Powell, good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Elliot Powell, Whitehall Development, 164 Conduit Street. I'm opposed to 9217. A couple of points. One, 85% of the middle school and high school state-rated capacity is in the current calculations according to Appendix F of the Board of Education Master Plan. So the school board, the state school board and the county have already modified the state-rated capacity by 15%. It's, I quote, for pupils in middle and senior high school grades 6 through 12 inclusive, the state-rated capacity is 85% of the product of the number of teaching stations and 25. So 25 times 0.85 is the state-rated capacity for middle schools and high schools as stated in the Board of Ed Master Plan. That's number one. Number two, Mr. Grasso, you have frequently stated that and even as recently as tonight, that a household produces 2 students per household, and actually it's been 2.5 in previous discussions. According to the Board of Ed, and their numbers are accurate, a household produces 0.392 students. That's about 6 times less than what you've stated previously. Kind of going off script a little bit, you've also mentioned in the past that this bill is to sort of put a cap on greedy developers. Well, the greedy developers that you're speaking to are not really greedy developers. They're builders, they're contractors, they're plumbers, they're backhoe operators, they're people in industry, they're title company operators, and on occasion a few godless land-use attorneys, who knows. But they're out there. They're men and women in your district and everybody's district who make a living in the building industry. It is not, this is a problem, this is a huge problem, and I think some people have articulated it very well, better than I can. But it's a problem that needs to be fixed. This particular bill is no fix. There needs to be a coming of the minds among all of us to figure out a proper solution to this very gnarly problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. Appreciate it. Ms. Rosberg, good evening.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Rossborg. I live at 24 Severn Way in Arnold, Maryland. I testified about this on February 21st of this year and brought to your attention that the 2016 School Adequate Public Facilities Task Force recommended a provision that no development can use more than 50% of the seats available for an individual school without mitigation. Yet that recommendation has gone nowhere, and it definitely could have helped Broadneck Elementary from being over capacity as a result of the Deep Creek Village development. We on the Broadneck Peninsula have the majority of our schools open. We are completely overwhelmed with development. All you need to do is drive down Route 2 in Arnold and you'll see 3 new developments just on Ritchie Highway alone. Drive back on East Joyce Lane and you'll see 2 more with a 3rd proposed. But nobody is listening to our concerns about having adequate public facilities in place before new development is approved. The traffic is acceptable according to traffic concepts, yet you drive down Route 50 to try to get to Route 50 in the morning from Joyce Lane and you're at a standstill. If you're trying to get from Route 50 up Route 2 and you come off, you have to be careful as you're coming around the underpass not to be stopped and have a crash. Yes, the county executive has said that the county should control residential growth through the general development plan, but it hasn't on the Broadneck Peninsula, and there's little hope that the next one will. We have to change. We've all said this, but I testified back here in February, and we haven't changed. We don't have a bill. It is a circuit breaker, as it was reflected. This is not the answer, yet it is the first step. So let's make sure we finish it.
Thank you, and thank you all for finishing on time. That concludes the public hearing. We'll conclude the public hearing. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 9217 as amended.
Bill number 9217 is amended, an ordinance concerning subdivision and development adequate public facilities.
Is there any discussion, Mr. Grasso, anybody?
Mr. Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, excuse me.
Mr. Cheknovich, just to piggyback on one of the points that was made with the testimony earlier, can you elaborate on that provision, the 85%? Is Anne Arundel County artificially reducing the state-rated capacity by 15%? I'm curious because that came up earlier.
Sure. For the record, Alex Cheknovich, Chief Operating Officer. There is a very prescriptive algorithm that's promulgated by the state of Maryland for all 24 jurisdictions that indicates that for high schools and middle schools, so secondary schools only, it's not applicable to elementary schools, you calculate the state-rated capacity for the entire building, and then it is derated by 15%. So it's set at 85% for all middle schools and all high schools statewide. And the rationale behind that is essentially that the way that an elementary school operates is very different, for example, than a high school. An elementary school, and you've got elementary school youngsters, when that child comes into their third grade classroom, they predominantly stay in that third grade classroom each and every day for the whole day, unless they go out for lunch, et cetera. So the elementary school is set at 100% because the child is stationary. At a secondary school, for example, a high school, from year to year or even semester to semester, there is essentially no predictability of what courses children will apply for. So there are a tremendous amount of electives, and they can range from anything like health or weightlifting at one range, all the way out to career technology, the traditional VOTEC kind of classes, et cetera. So a high school has to accommodate not just the capacity of the traditional English, math, histories, the foreign languages, et cetera, but they have to be large enough to be able to handle the students' election of those alternates, of those electives that they choose. And some electives are a whole year, some are only semesterized. You do an elective the first semester, elective the second semester. If you had a secondary school that was set at 100%, there will be absolutely no flexibility. The only way to use the building fully would be, instead of the child electing what class they would be taking, the administration would have to prescribe what electives those children are taking based on space availability. We don't operate that way. None of the jurisdictions operate that way. We want to make sure that the infrastructure in the building is robust to allow that student, and again, as they matriculate from 9th grade to 10th grade to 11th to 12th, they have more and more options for more and more electives, be they, again, APs, musics, histories, foreign languages, et cetera. So the building has to have some flexibility to be able to accommodate that very large array of electives. That doesn't exist at elementary school, and that's why that 15% derating factor across the state of Maryland, it's uniform, and we have to go by the state of Maryland processes.
And so you're saying that Anne Arundel County does not add any additional reductions on top of what the state mandated 15% for middle and high school number is?
That is correct. We are exactly in line with the state model, not any less or not any more.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Who's that? Mr. Fink. Excuse me.
Mr. Fink. Mr. Cheknovich, just to clarify what you two were just talking about, what Mr. Powell brought up earlier, the middle school and the high school, when we talk about it being 100%, what we're really talking about is it being 85%. Is that right? So if we're looking at the school chart in the next 30 minutes or whenever we get to that, and we see one of the schools is at 100% on that school chart, is it really 85%?
No, the state's determined that for middle and high schools, for middle and high schools, 85% equates to 100%.
100%. So on that
it's-
school chart, when I don't know where it is in this book, right, here it is. If I'm looking at one of the high schools and the high school says 100%, it's really 85% of the seats are taken.
85% of the physical seats are taken in the building, correct?
So if we bring this down to 95% through this bill, then are we talking 80% of the seats are taken?
No.
Is it still a reduction
it'll be-
of
it'll be
15 or
five-
just a reduction of 10?
It'll be 5% of 15%, so it's a pretty de minimis
Sure.
change.
Okay, so it's not really affecting the middle and the high schools. So really, this bill is just going after the elementary schools.
It would have a larger
Impact. Okay.
effect on
Sure.
elementary schools, yes.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Grasso.
I keep doing backflips here constantly, and you'd have thought I was asking for someone's blood here. Originally, the legislation I proposed was 90%. And once again, folks, it's a 500 capacity school, and you're asking for 50 surplus seats in a school to prevent one possibility of overcrowding. Now, some of my colleagues made a comment, once before that I think that the taxpayers pay for a fully occupied school, and that's what they should get. I would argue to say that if you go to that taxpayer and ask them, would you rather have your your kid in a school that's 100% capacity, or would you rather have your kid in a school that's at 75 or 80% capacity? And I can promise you 10 out of 10 people will tell you that they want their kids in a less crowded school. They don't want their kids in a maximum capacity school. And so what I'm saying here once again is that we are talking 25 seats cushion on a 500 capacity school, and you would think that I was asking for someone's arm here. Interesting enough, I just got a text message on the phone, and one of the things that the people turned around and said, John, the bottom line is the developers run Anne Arundel County. And if this bill doesn't pass, I'm telling you, that's who's running Anne Arundel County. As we get through these amendments, I'll have comments to say about each one of them, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Grasso. Mr. Trumbauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Shagnovich, I heard what you said about the rationale behind the 85%. And then I've heard some subsequent conversation which goes counter to what I think I heard you say. So I just want to clarify this. The way I understand this, the reason that secondary schools aren't, 100% is because the students move around. So for instance, if your first room period is English and you go there and there's 30 kids in the class, your next class may be chemistry, but there's only 22 kids in that class. Where'd the other 8 kids go? Well, they went to some other class, and so you need to have some built-in capacity to accommodate that flex or versatility among the classes, right? I mean, I would imagine that if it were 100% full, it would be physically impossible to schedule the academic coursework for the students unless you had equal-sized classes for every single classroom, which I think logistically would not be appropriate. Is my rationale in line with what you were explaining?
You're absolutely correct on all counts.
Wow, thank you, I'm done.
That's a yes, right?
I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Thank you.
That's a yes.
Thank you, Mr. Trumbauer. Mr. Shagnovich, can I ask you a question, please? Is in the formula, the 100 and the 85, which I understood what you said, are you actually counting seats? Is it seats that you're counting? Is it spaces?
So the state has a very prescriptive algorithm. It's actually by the use or functionality of the space.
Okay.
So the state says if this room, 30 by 30, 900 square foot room,
Okay.
if that room is used for English by 10th graders, it's rated at this number. If it's used, that same room, if it's used by first graders, it has a different assignment to it than if it's used by fifth graders. So they've got a chart, a formula that all 24 jurisdictions across the state of Maryland, we each and every year, Mr. Chairman, have to produce a floor map of each and every school. We have to do an accounting of each and every space in each and every building, specifically explaining what the utilization, what the physical use of that space is, each and every space, down to what's a telephone closet, what is an electrical closet, et cetera. And then we apply that algorithm, that state matrix to each and every one of the spaces.
Right. So it's square footage that you're doing. It's not actually seats, right?
No, it's actually the room. It's the room itself. As long as it exceeds a certain square footage, it counts as a room.
I'm sure I'm
then-
oversimplifying it. I'm sure it's got subtleties to it, but okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Anything further, Mr. Grasso? Anybody? Okay, I understand there are amendments. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 1. Oh, excuse me, read amendment number 2.
Amendment number 2. This amendment provides for an additional enrollment assessment methodology to determine average enrollment by cluster in a particular feeder, in addition to the individual school enrollment methodology for each applicable school. The averaging methodology cannot be utilized if any individual school enrollment within the applicable feeder system exceeds 105% of the state-rated capacity.
Motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt. Thank you. Second? Do I have a second? I will second it. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Can I just describe this amendment? The idea we're looking to do with this amendment is that we've seen the charts come through in numerous discussions on this bill that show the enrollment for elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. This doesn't really pertain to high schools. It only really pertains to middle schools and elementary schools. And it only pertains to middle schools if there's more than one middle school in a cluster. So this would really pertain to mostly to elementary schools. The idea being that the average enrollment of those elementary schools will be at 95% before they are closed. Currently under the bill, it's that if an individual school is at 95%, then that school would be closed. The idea that we're discussing is what we discussed, I believe, at the first hearing on this, where we talked about some of the schools in a cluster could have capacity at 95%, another one could have capacity at 80%, and there's no opportunity right now where these the schools at 95%, those kids can't go to the school where they're at 80%. We talked about the redistricting that we had all expressed support for, I think, including Mr. Shegnovich. I know it's a challenge for the board to do this, but the idea would be to give some motivation to the Board of Ed to redistrict these schools where we do have capacity that is not being used. So we would ask for your support of this amendment.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, Mr. Grasso.
You know, this is pretty disgusting, is really what it is. You guys should be ashamed of yourself, and I hope your boss is listening, okay? This is something that just gets to me more than anything, folks. The first thing they say is, let's redistrict our kids. Now, I don't know about you, but when my son's in school, if I can see the elementary school right down the street and someone told me that they was going to ship my kid 20 to 30 minutes away to another school, I would be in the front line yelling bloody murder. That wasn't going to happen with my kid. So the fact of the matter is, once again, the administration's trying to get away with kicking the can down the road again, and they want to take your kids and shift them a couple miles down the road, maybe 20, 30 minutes down the road, because they don't want to go into the developers' pockets. That's what this is. And again, I'm asking for 95%. I'm asking for 25 seats cushion, and you would just be surprised that you guys would even have the nerve to even try to play with that the least bit. Last time it was after 90%, and it lost by 1 vote. 90%. So when I came back at the 95, or excuse me, I shot for 90. I couldn't get consensus on the council. I went for 95. It lost by 1 vote. So now they're going to go over here and they're going to play around with 25 seats in an overcrowded school. Shame on you guys. That's all I got to say. And council, you do what you please. I don't support this amendment, and I think it's a shame that they'd even put something like this out here.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Just so I have clarity, you said this amendment allows the average of the cluster?
Correct.
Instead of
the
individual schools?
Instead of the individual schools.
For elementary schools?
For elementary schools and for middle schools. So if you picture, I don't have the chart right here, but when we get to that bill, you picture if you have 3 elementary schools, it would be the average of those elementary schools for the enrollment there. If there's 1 middle school, it's just the 1 middle school, but there's 2 middle schools, then it would be the average of those 2 middle schools.
Thank you.
Ms. Tate, did you have a point to make?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do. I actually want to walk through this amendment and have people at the table explain to me how this is actually going to work. I called Mr. Swain about this earlier today because
the way the amendment is drafted, it gives 2 different tests on deciding whether a school is to be closed. And I wanted to understand how the 2 tests work, who gets to decide which test actually applies to which school when a subdivision is submitted to the Office of Planning and Zoning, because it's unclear the way this is drafted. It has an "and" throughout the section. And one of the things I'll note before I get started is the Planning and Zoning Officer, this is 175502, in language that precedes the language in this bill, says shall determine for each public elementary, middle, and high school whether the school has capacity, and decide for that year each school that is open or closed. My understanding of the way this works is Section 4 remains, which is Mr. Grasso's 95% test. The administration's amendment adds an averaging test for the elementary schools. So you would have to average the elementary schools, then you would average middle schools if there are 2, as Mr. Marzik said, and then you would also consider whether the high school was at 95%. At that point, there would be use the average, and then you would make a determination as to whether or not the schools are open or closed using the average test. It's unclear which test controls. Does the 95% enclosed test controls? Does the average test controls? And then in sub 6, it throws an additional wrench that says you don't get to average if the respective feeder system exceeds 105% of the state-rated capacity. So I guess my first question is, who decides which test you use to decide whether the school is closed? I mean, according to this, it's supposed to be the Planning and Zoning Officer. And then you look at this, and then you look at the 105% capacity situation, and the way I see it playing out using another bill we have coming, say, for example, Broadneck has an open high school. They have an open middle school. They have 2 schools, Broadneck at 111% and Belvedere at 108%. So they wouldn't get the average test. You'd only be at the 95%. But then you travel over to the other side of our county in Meade, where you have an open high school, you have an open middle school, you have 2 schools, Frank Hebron Harbin at 101% and Seven Oaks at 101. Then you have 1 school that's an outlier at Maryland City, which I understand is having construction and there's capacity being added to that school. So the way it looks to me, based on this amendment, is those kids at the Meade feeder elementary schools at 101%, they don't get to enjoy the protections that the kids in the Broadneck feeder system get. They get more kids added to their school if whoever decides they want to choose the averaging test chooses the averaging test. So I'm just trying to understand. We went from having 1 test to 2 tests.
I'm going to defer to Mr. Swain on the first part because I'm not quite clear on your question. The second part is that if any individual school enrollment within the feeder is at 105%, then they can't do this.
Well, that's what I'm saying to you. Say you go to Meade and the schools that are left, because Maryland City gets...
is there any school that's over 105%?
There is 1, but they're slated
then
for
you can't do it in that. Then you can't do it in there.
Mr. Marzik, they're having an addition added to Maryland City. So I'm presuming, for sake of this example, that they will not be at 110% once they have their addition put on. But you'll still have Frank Hebron Harbin and Seven Oaks that are at 101% with an open high school and open middle schools. So the developer can come in and say, well, you're not at 105%, so guess what? We're going to pick the averaging test and we're going to stick, we want approval. Meanwhile, that means a school that was over capacity before this bill is now really over capacity because now it's gone from 95% to 103%.
That wouldn't work. If the schools are over 100%, their average would be above 95%, so they wouldn't be allowed to
Not necessarily, because those are only 2 of the several feeder examples that I said. I guess my question is...
Well, in that example, they wouldn't be eligible. If you have 2 schools that are over 100%, they're above 95%, so they would not be eligible under item 6 in the amendment.
But it says 105% here. So why
But
are
they
the
would be-
why are the kids in Mead get to go to 105 and the kids at Broadneck don't?
Because the enrollment would be at above 95%, which is the underlying principle of the bill, so they'd still be closed.
But that's not what this does. It gives you an option of picking two different tests because it's in the conjunctive. So that's what I'm missing here. That's not what this amendment does.
Mr. Swain, can you address the alternate test problem?
Certainly.
Good evening.
Greg Swain, Supervising County Attorney. What the amendment does is it creates, on the school chart, it creates basically an additional column. And the way the school chart works right now, prior to Mr. Grasso's bill, is that if the school's at 100% capacity, it's closed. If it's below that, it's open. Under Mr. Grasso's bill, that would be reduced to 95%. Now, what the amendment number 2 does, it adds an additional column basically on the school chart. So if the school is over 95%, but it's not over 100%, then if it's over 95%, it's going to be closed under the first column. At that point, an applicant can look at the second column, and the second column would be the average of the various individual schools in the feeder system. And if the average of the schools was between 95 and 100%, then the schools would be open. So you don't get to the second column unless you're closed under the first column.
So it's a second bite at the apple.
So it's an option, but it's not a choice, because you only get to the second column if the school is closed. But it is. It is, and it's meant to, I think, from the Board of, I won't speak for them, but I think the idea is if there are schools that have capacity, that capacity should be used, and that can be achieved through redistricting.
Well, would you, I'm going to say this in my simplistic way. In other words, that this council doesn't have the ability to monkey with that formula, to change the formula. So we're trying this. What this bill attempts to do is to after the formula has been applied, then make an alternate test that considers capacity in schools surrounding it, right?
Well, an alternate test, but even with the alternate test, the impact of the bill is still not going to be equal to what it is today, prior to Mr. Grasso's bill.
Okay, so with respect to the developers, this provides some relief.
Some.
But it doesn't eliminate the limit that, or it doesn't totally eviscerate the bill. It presents another option.
It creates an option. Correct.
Okay. Any other thoughts, Mr. Walker?
Mr. Swain or Mr. Marzick, is there a reason why the average that's used in the calculation a function of the percentage of capacity versus the number of seats? I mean, like, every school has a different number of seats, and I'm just trying to think if there's a benefit one way or the other to using the number of seats and averaging those over the schools versus the percentages. Because if you got, 700 seats at one elementary school and 400 at another one.
We hadn't looked at it from the seat perspective. I guess it was done based on the chart is the premise for this. The chart is not based on seats, it's based on percentages. And the law is based on percentage. So I think that was the...
Based on, oh, okay, got it.
Right, so the school was closed, under this bill, school was closed at 95%. It's not closed at 700 students, whatever it may be, but, so I think that was the logic of...
Technically it is though, right?
Right.
I mean, there's a certain number of seats per school, and then...
Right, but the code lays it
If there's two
out.
seats open at one school, that percentage is different than it is at another school.
Right, but
Mr. Shagnovich is shaking his head.
It's my understanding that the code as currently drafted is actually driven by the enrollment projection number and the state-rated capacity number. We calculate a percentage,
Right.
but the percentage is essentially a for convenience kind of item, because you can have in one school, the state-rated capacity could be 500,
Right.
and you're at 499, you do the math, it's 100%. But that school is open,
Right.
subject to the clarification that Councilman Fink introduced last year,
Right.
that next school down the road can have a SRC of 500, can have 500 students projected to be at it. It's still at 100%, but that's closed. So it's actually the number that's the driver, and I think if this was to be litigated, it will be litigated around the number, not the percentage. The percentage is more of a convenience factor as the ordinance is written today.
Correct. Correct, but
My opinion.
But I agree with him, but the bill that is in front of us is changing that, so that it's now going to be based on 95%, because that's what the change is that Mr. Grasso's bill proposes. So you're correct, the current law is that way, but this is being drafted to this bill.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Mr. Grasso.
Once again, they're just trying to squeeze a little more juice out of the already dried up orange. That's what we're doing here, and that's the bottom line. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Grasso. Any further discussion? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 2.
Mr. Smith?
Nay.
Mr. Grasso?
Nay.
Mr. Fink?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Nay.
Mr. Trumbauer?
No.
Mr. Walker?
Nay.
Mr. Peruka?
Aye.
2 in the affirmative, 5 in the negative. Amendment number 2 is defeated.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Excuse me, Madam Secretary. Please call the, please read amendment number 3.
Amendment number 3. This amendment provides for an additional mitigation option when schools are over 95% state-rated capacity, but less than 100%, and allows donations of land for new or expanded school facilities to mitigate capacity deficiencies based on the value of the land donated and the actual costs of construction of new or expanded school facilities.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Marzick? Oh, excuse me, I need a motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the council, this amendment, as we discussed in our earlier meetings, we are trying to look at opportunities to advance school construction. This is the issue of land banking that has come up numerous times in discussions related to a mitigation option. Currently, the option to build an expansion, build a school. This would give the option to donate land that could be used for a future school. This was one of the items that we had discussed with the board in prior discussions, and this would give an opportunity to mitigate when a school is closed by donating land that's acceptable to the Board of Ed and to the planning and zoning officer for construction of a future school.
Thank you. Ms. Tate, did you have a point to make on this?
Yeah, I do, actually. First of all, this is a little outside the original scope of the bill, adding a land banking program to the county code. Mr. Swain, do you care to comment on that?
Well, we have taken a look at that, meaning constitutional requirement that each bill contain one subject. We believe it's all in Title V, in the adequate public facility section of the code. We believe that the amendment is germane to the focus of the bill, particularly the 95% requirement. So based on our review of the cases, based on our review of the bill, and based on our review of the amendment, we don't feel that it's a violation of the one subject rule.
Okay, my second question is the land donated to the county or to the Board of Education?
It would be to the Board of Education.
And how do we ensure that the Board of Education is willing to take this land so that a developer can develop in an overcrowded school?
Well, what the bill does is it provides a process, first of all, under 175501-4, both the planning and zoning officer and the Board of Education have to approve the donation of land. Throughout the body of 175901G, the determinations regarding the land, in other words, whether it's suitable are joint determinations that are made by the Planning and Zoning Officer and the Board of Education. This is similar to the process that we currently use for school mitigation, which is school construction. The prior projects where we've had school construction have been more or less a joint project between the Planning and Zoning Officer by way of a mitigation agreement and the Board of Education by way of approval of construction to both reach an approved mitigation plan. This contemplates the same type of process.
Mr. Sheknovich, do you have anything from the Board of Education saying that they're willing to participate in this plan?
No, nothing formally, but the notion of land banking, of utilizing land acquisition has been one that has been talked about. So, I mean, the board has not taken a formal voted position on this. They've not even had the opportunity, but this is not a new topic in terms of the school district or the Board of Education.
Okay, my final question is again for Mr. Swain. How's this land banking program going to work in light of the sunset provision that's written into this bill? Is it a sample land banking program? I mean, how's that going to work?
Well, there is a sunset on the bill, and if the bill were to expire, any mitigation that had been initiated by a land donation would have already been completed, and that property would have already been transferred to the Board of Education. Now, you have to recognize that this program will have a fairly limited application because, first of all, you're only eligible for it if you're over the 95% in that school, in that feeder district. Second of all, the mitigation that's calculated is more or less per student based on the actual construction cost of these types of schools, and those costs are substantial. They're in the $50,000 range. So if you'd have to have a fairly significant land donation based on the property's assessed value to create enough capacity to be able to proceed with anything other than a fairly modest development.
And the land has to be in the location where the school is over capacity?
The land is for it to be acceptable as a land donation, both the Planning and Zoning Officer and the Board of Education have to agree that that land is suitable either as a standalone site or as an add-on to an existing site, or potentially as a combination from other developments and other developers.
So it's for within that feeder system, or is it donated to alleviate the overcapacity situation at the school where the developer wants to build?
Well, it would be to mitigate in that feeder system.
But not necessarily the school that's overcapacity?
Ideally, the school that's overcrowded, not necessarily.
Those are my questions.
Thank you, Ms. Tate. I see a lot of lights on. I lost track of who's next.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fink?
Thank you. Ms. Sheknovich, as the COO, I mean, what are your thoughts on this amendment, land banking? I know we've had some success in the past where developers have given property to the school board, Farmington Village in Pasadena. That property was given 10, 12, 15 years ago, and it looks like it just made it onto the 6-year plan. I would think it's pretty valuable at the end of the day. And as a COO, what's your opinion? I know you can't speak for the board, but.
Certainly I mean, I am in favor of the notion of expanding the toolkit of mitigation options. I think land banking or land acquisition, land proffering in this case, is a viable solution set if done properly and all the proper protections for the public are put in place.
And you believe those protections are in this amendment?
Given a quick read, it does look like most of those protections have been contemplated in here.
Okay. And I don't know if you can answer this question, but the Farmington Village School, when that is built, I mean, what kind of money is being saved on that project by not having to purchase that land? I mean, is it $2 million? Hard questions donated.
Yeah, it's going to be based on the assessable value of the land. But the Farmington site, though, I don't want to oversell this as a panacea because you yourself said that land was donated to the school district 15 years ago, and based on a number of reasons, it has not been developed, and it's just now making it into the 6-year plan. One of the tests in the amendment as it's proposed is that site has to be there has to be a reasonable belief that land will be developed as an active school site within a 6-year window. That will be a harder test. So you're not going to have a land bank situation where land's going to sit fallow for a year and a half, or sorry, for a decade and a half. It's either going to have to work quickly, or it's going to probably fall outside of the boundary of this mitigation test.
Sure. But if that property wasn't, again, we're sticking a lot on Farmington Village, but if that property wasn't donated to the school board, say it was developed and the community was just that much bigger, that much larger, now we have the issues of the elementary schools, Solly Elementary, Marley, being overcrowded. I mean, to find land now to build that school would be almost impossible. So the fact that we were given that land was a major benefit to the school board.
No, absolutely. Again, that's why the idea of land banking, not just through this bill, Councilman Fink, but in general. I mean, it is sound public policy, and not just for schools. I mean, you should be looking at it for public safety. You should be looking at it for libraries and other public infrastructure. But land banking is critical, especially as you indicate, those larger parcels, the available parcels that are adequately sized and configured so that it can be built upon. They're not in wetlands, they're not in ravines, et cetera. Those are diminishing with every passing month. So having the ability to lock in some of that land for future public sector development is critical, I believe, to the welfare of this entire county.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Trumbauer and Mr. Pruski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't really have a question. I guess I just have a couple statements. But first, I'm intrigued by this idea. I think it's a good idea. I'm uncomfortable attaching it as an amendment to a much simpler bill. My second concern, because I think it needs more vetting and more discussion, but my second concern is I do think that there's an appetite, at least by me, but I think among some of my colleagues, to really take a look at mitigation in general. And I'm worried if we just stick this on to an amendment on this bill, that'll be it and we'll be done. And I would rather do a more thoughtful consideration of various options to address this. So I just wanted to make those statements. I don't intend to support this amendment, but I appreciate the effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trumbauer. Mr. Pruski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to be clear with this amendment, because this was a big discussion I think we've had in prior council sessions, approval for something like this would be both the Board of Ed, the county executive introducing a resolution, and county council approval. Am I correct in saying that? So that there'd be a check and balance, that somebody brings something forward and hands me a plot that's on Route 2 Ritchie Highway and you can't build anything, versus something that's a developable lot, that you have a check and balance from both sides.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pruski. Mr. Smith.
In light of, actually, I was going to ask or comment on what Mr. Trumbauer had spoke about earlier. This whole effort of mitigation, is the county, whether this passes or fail, are they going to entertain a subsequent bill that includes much more comprehensive mitigation efforts when it comes to school APF standards, as well as residential, commercial, everything? I mean, I would like to see this applied across the board, just like Mr. Cheknovich had mentioned, and other aspects. And so is the administration, is their intent to come down? If not, we can certainly do it, but is their intent to come down and introduce a much more broader perspective when it comes to this type of application?
Mr. Smith, if you can tell me there's 4 votes for it, we'd be more than willing to bring it down for you. It's a complicated issue. We've been struggling over this for the last, I guess, 6 weeks, trying to come up with options. We've asked councilmen for options. Some have brought some options forward. There have been some legal issues with that. We think we thought the first one was viable. We think this is the most viable option. This is the one that has generated the most support. We've worked with Mr. Cheknovich on this as well, so we'd be very willing to look at mitigation options, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
But we think this is a good opportunity. I think to Mr. Trumbauer's point, I mean, this is a good test run. We've got a bill that's going to be expiring in 2 years, so this is a good opportunity to see if people are willing to step forward on the land banking side of things. So it's a good test run while we come forward with a bill that, if you introduce a mitigation bill right now, it may not be coming forward for another 6 months. So, time is of the essence. We have a good opportunity right before us now.
Mr. Berger. Thank you. Mr. Grasso.
Just sitting up here, I just love this rich conversation. 10, 11 months ago, I introduced this legislation, and the administration was nowhere around. In fact, they were against the 95% bill. Now that we've stirred up the pot a little bit, now they want to come out as the white knight going to save the world. And it all has to do with the contributions. That's really what it's all about. And folks, I know you know this, but I got to say it anyway. What we've got here with this amendment is similar to saying, I'm going to give you the car or give you the wheels, but you worry about the car later, okay? Or the body of the car. This land banking is worth nothing if the Board of Education doesn't have the money to build the schools. It's just that simple. And it's $30–40 million from elementary school and probably $100 million plus for a high school. So they're going to give us some land, but we don't have the money to build the school. And in the meantime, they're going to build some massive development and say, well, we gave you the land, but it's your problem to come up with the money to build the school. Now, the interesting part about it is Councilman Pruski, we were talking about a month ago. And he's got a situation in his area where they're building a large development and there isn't any land to build the school. But once again, even if there was the land, where's the county going to come up with the money to build the school? And the interesting part about this whole deal was that him and I were talking about a tag-along piece of legislation, which is the legislation I spoke to earlier that would address these situations, except with my legislation, it counts the seats. It doesn't let the developer just get away and say, here's 10 acres, good luck, Anne Arundel County, you come up with the money to build the school. My legislation requires the school to be built and to physically have the seats available before you can build your development. Mine answers the question of how we're going to get these kids into a school system. This right here is just giving you the tire to the car, and you got to come up with the rest of the car. It is as worthless as it is that piece of paper. And once again, I'm on fire tonight because I'm just blown away how 10 months ago, the administration couldn't say anything about any of this and was all against it. And now because they see I've picked up steam about this along with the Chum Chum bill, now they're turning around and jumping out and saying, well, let's get on the Grasso bandwagon. Where were they 9–10 months ago? That's my point, and that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Mr. Grasso. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll on amendment number 3?
Mr. Smith.
For the record, I would love for this to come down as a separate process because I am in favor of actually mitigating and finding land to bank because I think that's important. I know Mr. Grasso doesn't think the value of the land is important, but it actually is a part of the whole process. And so you got to have the land to even if you don't have the money for the school, you still need the money for the land. But in light of that, I do think the simplistic version is the easiest way. So nay on this one.
Mr. Grasso.
No.
Mr. Fink.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer.
No.
Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Peruka.
Aye.
4 in the affirmative, 3 in the negative. Amendment number 3 passes.
Thank you. Bill number 9217 as amended will be heard on January 16, 2018. Madam Secretary, please read the bill, please read the title of Bill 9317.
Bill number 9317, an ordinance concerning Sherwood Forest Special Community Benefit District, approval of loan and assignment agreement.
Motion to it.
No, Mr. Chairman, members of the council, Bernie Marzi, County Executive's Office, with me at the table, Tommy Adebu from the Budget Office, Kinley Bray from the Office of Law. This bill was amended back in December to fix the date listed on the bill, and we'd ask for your support tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Marzik. Any question, any discussion? Good evening. We'll now open the public hearing on Bill number 9317. Do you have any sign up for that? Seeing no movement, we'll close the public hearing on Bill 9317. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 9317 as amended.
Bill number 9317 is amended, an ordinance concerning Sherwood Forest Special Community Benefit District, approval of loan and assignment agreement.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for the record, Sherwood Forest is in the Great District 6 area, and I do support the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trumbauer. Anybody else? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 9317 as amended.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Grasso.
Aye.
Mr. Fink.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Aye.
Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Peruka.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 9317 is amended, is passed.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title of Bill number 9617 as amended.
Bill number 9617 is amended, an ordinance concerning public safety, animal control, community cats.
Thank you. Mr. Grasso.
Well, you can bear with just one more, Miss Tate, okay? One more. I'm sorry for being so outspoken and not towing the line, okay, like everybody else. Once again, I think everybody knows why we're here, and there's a whole lot that has to be said. I do want to let you know that Facebook has busted us over 30 to 31,000 people that like what we are doing, okay? Unfortunately, I've had maybe 2 people out of 268 that were negative, and maybe 1 other person. So that would lead me to believe that we're all moving in the right direction, and I hope the council would see that and support this piece of legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Grasso. Mr. Marzick, administration.
We're supportive of the bill, Mr. Chairman. We hope you'll support it tonight. We've met with numerous advocates on this issue, and we do have some concerns that we think we'll have to work out in the future, but we're comfortable with the bill in the current posture.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since the last meeting, I've gotten several emails from actually opponents of the bill, and they've provided some material and some concerns. I got a book. And I just wanted to clarify a couple things and allow you guys the chance to answer, and the sponsor if he wants. But for several people have asked about the legality of a TNR program and whether or not that comports with county code, and so I thought I'd give you a chance, Ms. Duden, to answer that, if you would.
A TNR program comports with county code if this bill is adopted.
Correct.
A TNR program is currently being run by the state under their code, and there have been both sides presented to us also about the TNR program, specifically the issue of the R, which is return or release.
Sure.
Putting the animals back out into the open. And that really, I know I'm giving you a wishy-washy answer, but it could be argued both ways, because it currently is up for debate whether a feral cat, which isn't currently defined in county code but is defined in COMAR, figures into our definition of an animal that has to be retained once you take it into your custody. And both sides of that can be argued, but because we don't have a definition of feral cat in the county code currently, without this bill being passed, to me, we do have to follow the definition that's in state code, and there is a state code COMAR definition of feral cat.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Duden. And another concern several folks have brought up to me is whether or not, if Anne Arundel County became a TNR jurisdiction, other areas would then use us as a, for lack of a better phrase, a dumping ground for their own community cats. That doesn't seem very plausible to me, but is that something that has been brought to your attention, Ms. Catlett, or do we have any thoughts on that? I just wanted to give you a chance to respond to that as well.
I would say the simplest thing is there are surrounding jurisdictions. Most of our bordering jurisdictions, Baltimore County, for example, already have programs like this in place. And a TNR program is not supposed to encourage abandonment of animals. In fact, even with the drafting as it is, we'd still be pets that were owned, i.e. pets that would be at risk of abandonment, which should still be coming into the shelter, going to the appropriate place so that they could be rehomed as opposed to returned or released into the community.
Gotcha. And then my final question is, there was some concern about whether or not, if the program works and the community cats are captured and I guess vaccinized or whatever we're going to do to them.
Neutered,
correct. Yep. And then they're put back. Do any of those vaccinations then require further, booster shots or additional maintenance? And is that contemplated in what the volunteer service or the volunteers would be doing? I just don't know anything about pet vaccinations, so it's like I honestly have no idea. I'm asking.
Yeah, fair enough. You want me to take her? Or you want to take
You
it?
can answer it from the medical point of view.
Okay. So rabies vaccinations are the main things that we're talking about here. For an animal, the first vaccination that the animal can receive would be good for 1 year. After that, subsequent vaccinations can be good for 3 years based on the label of the vaccines as they are done. And that's in terms of the medical. I guess I'll let you handle the next legal interpretation part.
Sure thing, Mr. Trumbauer. If you look at line 4 of page 3, where it talks about the definition of trap, neuter, return, it also says that includes a plan for revaccination of the community cat in accordance with state law.
Okay, very good. It's right there. Okay.
I also want to point out, just to be the devil's advocate to Mr. Marzek, we did say that the ear tipping is only evidence of one vaccination because obviously there's no way to guarantee it. But as Mr. Marzek points out, it does say revaccination in accordance with state law. But the ear tipping
presumably there's some sort of records being kept for the animals, so you would be able to do that.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. But if one, for some reason, fell through the cracks, you can only assume before you bring it into animal control that the ear tipping means it at least got one vaccination.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And lastly, before I relinquish the control of the mic, I'll reiterate, last meeting I went through the whole thing about whether the county has a feral cat problem and what options currently are, and I think we all agreed that they were deficient. But just for the record, part of my understanding of the value of this this legislation is that it would bring the resources from these groups and these volunteers to be assisting your office, right? Is there a way that we can quantify that, or is there any value that we can assign on how many more feral cats that this county would be able to address than if we did nothing? Is that an unanswerable question?
It's probably
The
pretty
deputy chief seems to think
unanswerable.
so.
The folks that are here that actually participate in TNR might be better at answering that than us, because the
Sure, we
goal
have a
isn't
fair
for the
number signed
county
up,
to do the program. The goal is to actually kind of enable those folks who are interested in helping assist with resolving the problem to be able to do that. So they might be able to give you a better idea of how many volunteers they have interested and willing to help with that than we would.
Understood.
At this point.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Trumbauer. Mr. Walker, were you? No?
Sorry.
Mr. Grasso?
We're good, Mr. Burger. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? We will now open the public hearing. And we have a number of people who have signed up. And let me begin by thanking all of you for your patience this evening to get to this point. Carolyn Kyborn, Molly Adams, Keith Burnham, Hank Rain, Susan McDonough, and I think that was 5. Let me read one more. Would you all please come down, and Emily Hoverdale. Good evening again. How you doing? And again, I thank you for your patience. Please give us your name and address in 2 minutes, please. Ms. Kyborn?
Hi, I'm Carolyn Kilborn.
Oh, Kilborn, excuse me.
Founder of Maryland Votes for Animals and a resident of Hillsmere. I'm asking for your support of Bill 9617 without the recent amendments proposed by the administration. Passing this bill without amendments is critical. Please let me explain why. First, we all agree that Anne Arundel County has a cat overpopulation problem. Approximately 1,000 cats are euthanized each year because the county is inundated. Approximately 100,000 outdoor cats live in low-income areas where people do not have the financial wherewithal to deal with all those cats. We all agree that trap, neuter, return is the solution for Anne Arundel County. Adding TNR to our code will energize the many volunteers and nonprofits who will work for free to help solve our pet overpopulation problem. And many of those people are here tonight. But it is critical that this bill be passed without the most recent amendments. Why? Number one, because the current bill utilizes standard definitions and best practices for TNR that have been developed through the years. They're tested and approved by the American Veterinary Association and utilized by the state of Maryland and the city of Baltimore. Unfortunately, the amended bill utilizes errant definitions and practices that are well-meaning but confusing and ineffective. Because it is critical that all owned cats of all types, stray, feral, domesticated, abandoned, lost, be eligible for TNR. We need clarity on that matter. You can't tell by looking at a cat if it's just a shy cat or a feral cat. In closing, the original proposed bill, which was initiated 2 years ago, has been evaluated, modified, and remodified and agreed to on December 18th. Please pass that version of the bill.
Thank you, Mrs. Coburn. I appreciate that very much. It just might help other people's testimony. My understanding is that there are no amendments being introduced. Okay, so if that's helpful to you.
Okay, that is helpful. Thank you.
Ms. Adams. Armas, excuse me. Ms. Armas, I'm
no
sorry.
worries. My name is Molly Armas. I'm a staff attorney with Alley Cat Allies. I'm here on behalf of our supporters here in Anne Arundel County and encourage you to pass 9617. Anne Arundel County would join over 650 municipalities who have adopted a TNR ordinance or policy, and thousands more are conducting grassroots volunteer-led programs. The language in the bill is consistent with many of the other communities who have passed trap, neuter, return ordinances. It reflects good public policy. The individuals and groups that engage in trap, neuter, return across the country understand these terms. All the national animal advocacy groups that support trap, neuter, return use these same terms. Trap, neuter, return really is the present and the future of animal control. There is considerable evidence showing that TNR is effective, efficient, and humane, and more effective, efficient, and humane than trap and euthanize programs for the management of community cats. Although opponents will claim you have a choice between doing trap, neuter, return and no cats outside, that's just not true. Most community cats are not adoptable. Sanctuaries for cats they're not feasible, they're not cost effective, and trap and euthanize is ineffective, inefficient, costly, and not supported by the majority of Americans. We encourage you to pass 9617 as is, and I think, especially based on the testimony from so many of your residents last time, it really reflects what Anne Arundel County residents want. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is it Keith Burnham?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm Keith Burnham, live at 7406 Belclair Court in Jessup in District 1. I'm happy to support Community Cat Bill as written, and I'd like to present some basic facts based on my experience as both an animal lover, a community cat caregiver, and the director of a nonprofit cat rescue organization. In a hurricane, the fact is you need all the help you can get. You don't have Government Emergency Management Agency tell the Red Cross not to come, not to pass out blankets. You don't make them sneak around in the dark with their blankets. You don't mandate that people only go to pre-approved shelters when any place with beds will do. What you do is remove obstacles and work with the non-government organizations to help those hurricane victims. Well, the fact is the hurricane's out there. 2 unaltered cats can have hundreds of thousands of offspring in just a few years. The cats are already out there. But the good news is the rescuers are already out there too. And the vets are already in place, and they're not costing the county a dime. Tens of thousands of cats have already been trapped, neutered, vaccinated, and are now living out their lives either in managed colonies or as pets that have found a new home through adoption. There are rescuers here tonight who have helped thousands of people spay or neuter their pets, or the cats they feed on their porch, or with the colonies they feed every night. That represents hundreds of thousands of kittens that will not be born, unwanted by a pet owner, starving or freezing under a porch or a bush, or in a feral colony where they will be of breeding age in just a few short months. Let the rescuers trap, let the vets neuter, and let the caregivers take care of returned cats. Please enact the legislation as is. Let's get this done so we can work together.
Thank you very much.
I had a second point, just briefly.
Sure.
Senator Weingrad testified last time about he's a bird person. We shouldn't be dividing ourselves into cat people, dog people, bird people. We're all animal lovers. The fact is, in nature, big animals kill little animals. Sharks kill baby seals, wolves kill caribou, cats kill birds and mice, but big birds also kill little kittens.
Thank you for your point, sir. Appreciate it very much. Mr. Hank Rain?
Hello, my name is Hank Reiser. I live in Sylvan Shores. Here are 10 reasons why I support this bill and ask that you vote for it tonight. The current bill will do what is intended, reduce cat populations and complaints by adding TNR services for all unowned cats and support volunteers and nonprofits at no cost to the county. 2, it lays the foundations for a turnkey program. There's a nationwide community cat Bible that lays everything out, and from that, the county can draw policy and procedures to easily complement this bill. 3, the current bill says very clearly that all unowned cats can be TNR'd. 4, the bill does not mandate that nonprofits keep non-value-added lists. 5, this bill has been approved by the SPCA, Spay, Neuter, Nook Clinic, Rude Ranch, Cats R Us, and Sunshine Rescue. These nonprofits provide millions of dollars in services to a large number of citizens, and they back this bill. Number 6, the basic tenets of the bill are vetted by the county law office all last summer for the Hillsmere MOU, and then they were involved with this bill this fall. So they are on board. And Animal Control supported this bill 2 weeks ago. 7, the concepts in this bill have been successfully used for a decade here in our county and were used the entire last 2.5 years with the Hillsmere Volunteers. 8, the bill is modeled after other successful jurisdictions. 9, the bill is fiscally responsible as discussed on 18 December. 10, it should encourage, not limit, more vets to participate in a low-cost spay-neuter program. Finally, the need for TNRs, because we have failed to reach the inside cats and their owners. Mostly these are low-income folks. The problem starts inside and ends up outside. We have to do better, but we need the county's help. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reiser. Apologize for mispronouncing your name, and I appreciate your organized testimony. Ms. McDonough, Susan McDonough?
Susan McDonough. I'm Susan McDonough. I'm the veterinarian for, I have the contract at Anne Arundel County for the spay and neuter program, and I also have a private practice that does low-cost spay and neuters. I won't reiterate, but I absolutely endorse everything that's been said at this table today. Anne Arundel County Animal Shelter Animal Control did not euthanize any adoptable animals in 2016 or 2017. This is a rare statistic for a shelter that always accepts all the animals that come to it. They took in 10 rabbits today, and there's another 10 coming tomorrow. Anyone want a pet rabbit? Tomorrow, the pregnant ones are going to be spayed. Thanks to the pet-loving public and the truly heroic efforts from many rescue groups that interact with the shelter, the rabbits and all the other adoptable pets will get homes. The bunnies, the pet pigs, and the dogs are not the cause of euthanasia at our animal shelter. The adoptable pets get homes. The problem is the unwanted cats. It is especially important that this bill be passed now. The breeding season for outdoor cats is upon us. Right now, the unknown queens that we are spaying are not pregnant. As the days lengthen and the nights get warmer, they will be pregnant. Please do your part to help us now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. McDonough. May I ask you, what is the gestation period for kittens, for cats?
63 to 69 days. So starting at the end of January, beginning of February, into the middle of February, meow, 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 63 to 69 days.
Thank you for your organized testimony. Appreciate it very much. Let me call.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
I
Mr.
just want to
Grasso,
talk to Doctor. You have the ABC animal
That's
thing,
correct,
right?
yes.
How much do you actually charge to spade neuter cats?
We have two prices.
Uh-huh.
We have what we call our unowned cat product or unowned cat program. We charge $55, and for that, spay, neuter, deflea, deworm, rabies vaccination, distemper vaccination, and we don't care if the cat's pregnant or not.
Wow.
I'm not alone. Thank you very much. We charge more for owned cats, and frankly, you're supporting this program.
Thanks for everything you do, because I know a lot of people up in the northern area come out and send their cats. I constantly send them to you, and I keep saying there's a nice person over there at ABC, and you're over there on Veterans Highway, like by the police station or down from that. Yeah, very good. Thank you so much for what
I'm
you do.
sorry, I missed one, didn't I? I'm sorry, Ms. Hoverdale.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Oh, there we go. Thank you. I'm Emily Hovermill, the Maryland State Director for the Humane Society of the United States, here on behalf of our supporters and members in Anne Arundel County. This bill recognizes the responsibility the public shares in protecting the community's animals and empowers residents to take action that improves their communities. Working alongside humane organizations and allowing residents to openly manage cat colonies promotes the adoption of sanitary feeding practices, reduces nuisance complaints, and enables collaboration with authorities within a problem, enables collaboration with authorities when a problem does arise. By clearing cats, the pathway for cats to be sterilized, an overall reduction in the community's outdoor cat population can be realized more quickly, which is something I think that we can all agree is what we're ultimately here for. Our opponents may disagree that this is more anecdotal information, but the Journal of the American Veterinary Medical Association just released a study last year of 8 years studying San Jose, California, and their progress there implementing an aggressive TNR targeted strategy, which reduced both cat intake by 29% and cat euthanasia by 67%. The city animal care also found that they had additional resources to give to the shelter animals following the implementation of the program. As has been alluded to, outside funding is also available for trap, neuter, return that lethal management strategies just do not have the resources out there that people are trying to support that. In a little bit of an answer to the question that Councilmember Trumbauer asked, you know, I mentioned the last time we were here that I serve on the State Spay and Neuter Advisory Board, which advises the grant program the state offers. It's a fund of over $800,000 that's available to organizations around the state to get funding for TNR and also for owned cats. And currently there are 0 TNR groups within the county that are getting any of that money. Just again, this is a widespread spectrum. I was pretty much done. Thank you.
Thank you for being done. Okay, thank you very much, folks. You're dismissed. And let me call Barbara Johnson, Marion Hosner, Caroline Hosner, I think that's Hosmer, excuse me, Jane Brunt, Alice Burton, and Margaret Elizabeth Bishop. And again, I thank you all for coming down. Let's begin with Ms. Johnson.
I'm Barbara Johnson. I live at 1905 Kingswood Court, Annapolis, in District 6. And as president of the Maryland Ornithological Society and also vice president and past president of the Anne Arundel Bird Club, which is an organization, both are linked organizations dedicated to the conservation and study and enjoyment of birds, I express my opposition to Bill 9617 for the following reasons. Free-roaming domestic cats, a non-native species introduced and maintained by people, are a major predatory threat to wild birds and small mammals, annually killing billions of wild creatures which will permanently be removed from the web of life, never to reproduce and uphold or add to their populations. This is a people-caused threat to wildlife, which can only have a people-led solution. I agree with the American Bird Conservancy, the Center for Disease Control, the Pet Food Institute, and the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals that overall jurisdictions allowing maintained TNR colonies do not find reductions in free-roaming cat colonies. There is no provision in Bill 9617 restricting community cat colonies from operating near sensitive areas such as parks, woodlands, or shorelines where many birds concentrate to nest or to rest and feed during migration. A fed, vaccinated, free-roaming cat can survive many years past its capture and neutering, during which time it can kill hundreds of native birds and small mammals. Many species of birds, particularly neotropical migrants such as warblers, small shorebirds, and our state bird, the Baltimore oriole, are under such pressure that we don't have the decades it would take to see if the TNR experiment eventually reduces the population of free-roaming cats. Bill 9617 effectively puts at risk many distinct, vulnerable, and/or threatened species of animals in order to maintain individuals of a species that will never be threatened with extinction.
Ma'am, thank you very much for your testimony. I appreciate you coming out. Ms. Marion Hosmer?
Hi, I'm Marion Hosmer. I live at 976 Lee Road in Crownsville, Maryland. Cat overpopulation is a cycle that starts in homes. If an intact cat falls in the hands of people that cannot afford the cost of a spay or have no transportation, that cat is at a high risk of running out of a home to mate or being abandoned outside. This creates the beginning cycle of outside unsocialized cats. A year and a half ago, I went to Anne Arundel County Animal Control to offer my problem-solving skills, identifying at-risk cats, spay, neuter, outreach, and trapping. The director listened to me until she became aware that not only did I work with indoor cats, but I stopped the breeding of outside cats as well. And since the current codes are not written to help these cats, she told me she'd call me later. So I went to the Annapolis SPCA in my county and offered my skills. I explained to them if they had people that kept turning in cats and kittens, those people may need help and they could contact me. It would be only a week before I received my first phone call. I met a husband and wife that were trying to manage a group of 12 cats that were fed at their house and neighborhood. In the 3 years this couple cared for these cats, they took the kittens into their homes, struggling to keep them healthy, safe, and socialized. During that 3 years, they turned in 35 kittens to the SPCA. Within 3 days, I trapped the 12 cats and had them spayed. That trail of kittens from those cats was stopped. Through this outreach last year, many residents received a solution, stopping the reproduction of 300 community cats as well as 400 owned cats from low-income homes. I urge you to pass Bill 9617, giving county residents more options to stop overpopulation of cats and give all cats the chance to be spayed.
Thank you, Ms. Hosmer. Carolyn Hosmer?
Thank you.
Hosmer, I'm sorry, I said it wrong.
My name is Caroline Hosmer. I reside at 976 Lee Road, Crownsville, Maryland. I am currently a 10th grader at Old Mill High School. When I was in 3rd grade, all students had to write a book as part of a school project. Most children wrote about unicorns, sports, and adventures. I wanted to share with you an excerpt from my story, which I wrote when I was 9 years old. My story is about 2 cats, Tiger, a male white cat with black stripes, and Brandy, a female brown tabby. They meet, and the next day, Brandy has kittens. "What are we going to do with all the kittens?" said Tiger, the boy cat. "Let's just wait," said Tiger. "We can't wait," said Brandy, the girl cat. "By the time we think of an idea, I will have lots of kittens, and eventually we will have too many to take care of, and we will die." While they were talking, a boy and girl came by and said, "Look, some kittens. Let's get all of the cats and kittens spayed and neutered so that they will not have any more kittens. Please pass Bill 9617 today."
Thank you very much, Ms. Hosmer. I appreciate it. Ms. Jane Brunt?
Hi, my name is Jane Brunt, and I'm a veterinarian. I reside at 46 Chesapeake Landing in Annapolis in Eastport. I have been a practicing veterinarian for over 25 years. My practice is limited to cats, and for the past 10 years, I've served as executive director for the Catalyst Council. We're a coalition to promote the health, welfare, and value of cats. I am in support of the bill and the amendments, and I have to say that I have high respect for all the parties that are here, most especially Robin Catlett, who's the director of the Anne Arundel County Animal Control, and she's a certified animal welfare administrator. Of course, my colleague, Dr. Sue McDonough, Barbara Johnson, and others. The scope of the people here at this hearing is remarkable, and I really enjoyed your story. Thank you. I think everybody agrees we have too many cats that are free roaming. Most are unneutered and contributing to the problem. This is difficult in our community and across the nation, but not enough data is available on what works, where, when, and how. What's best in any given country, county, community, or neighborhood is variable, and what's important is that trap, neuter, return be allowed to occur and that community cat caregivers be protected under this legislation. What's also important is that collaborative conversations between opponents continue to take place so that we can promote the health of our county, our neighbors, and the cats in our area. Passage of this bill is just the beginning, so let's get to work together so that we can see bumper stickers that read "Annapolis digs cats." Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. And great timing again. May I ask you a question? I've heard repeatedly that everybody agrees that there's too many cats. I think you said so yourself. And we've also heard that these programs work and they're successful. And I guess my simplistic question is, if these programs work, why hasn't the problem gone away? Why hasn't it been solved? Overly simplistic question?
Yeah, it is, and some of the data cited is simplistic to the point where the Society of Animal Welfare Administrators, which oversees the National Coalition on Pet Population, is holding a forum next summer to try and identify what data is still needed, what we know, common definitions, because industry-wide, it's a very complex problem. TNR works in many communities, and it can, especially when we do the data and the due diligence to gather the evidence and then report on it.
Can I ask you one other thing, thank you, that troubles me a little bit about this, and it's just been nagging at me. That is, there are many people who want to, and we've seen evidence of quality people, decent, wonderful people that want to engage in this care for cats. But is there a fallout on the people that live next door to these people, or across the back lawn from these people? Is there, in other words, are we by promoting this kind of program, are we trespassing on others?
My opinion is that we're promoting relationships in communities, and we have to do that by talking and by working together to spay-neuter cats, especially free-roaming cats, but indoor cats and owned cats as well. Dr. McDonough will say how many, many cats still need to be neutered, and while you might say, well, you're a veterinarian, you have a practice, you don't want less business. No, I want cats cared for. So working together, we can do it, and having the conversations, we can do it. No, I don't think it impacts the rights of others.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. Let me, no, we didn't get everybody yet. I'm sorry. Alice Burton? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Alice Burton. I'm the Associate Director of Animal Control and Animal Shelter Engagement with Alley Cat Allies. I am also the state representative for the National Animal Care and Control Association. My role at Alley Cat Allies is to go out to animal control agencies and shelters and localities, elected officials like yourself, and talk to them about TNR programs. The reason I'm so lucky to be able to do that is I was an animal control officer for 14 years in Arlington, Virginia, 11 of those as chief. I'm not proud to say that I was against TNR when we first implemented it in 2009, but 6 months after we implemented the program, I saw the positive benefits, and I actually asked if myself and my deputies could take over the program. We knew we could do a better job because we knew where the problems were. The caregivers who were once hiding were now coming out and talking to us because we had a life-saving program. The folks who were complaining about the cats going into their yards and sometimes destroying their property, we then had, to answer your question, we had deterrents for them. And they saw the behavior modified once these cats had surgery and were brought back. They weren't fighting, they weren't tearing up any of the furniture, they weren't trying to get their territory, they weren't looking for a date on Saturday night. They really were modified. The animal control officers, we saw a decrease in nuisance complaints, decrease from 913 complaints the year of 2009 to 47 in 2015. That's a huge, huge improvement, and those are man-hours that we could spend everywhere else. And we had great relationships, again, with the caregivers and the other folks in the community. Am I out of time?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
thanks for trying to answer my question as
You're
well.
welcome.
Ms. Margaret Elizabeth Bishop?
Thank you. Margaret Elizabeth Bishop. I reside in Crofton. And I can no longer enjoy the fruits of my garden or grow strawberries to eat and herbs because of cat excrement and spraying on my plants. Cats are a destructive footprint man has made on the landscape. To eliminate free-roaming cats is to protect those creatures that cannot protect themselves from a predator introduced by man, Felis catus. Outdoor cats are the single worst threat to birds caused by humans. No one likes the idea of killing cats, but sometimes it is necessary. Birds pollinate plants, spread seeds, and control insects. Birds are the glue which binds a healthy ecosystem together. Outdoor cats are the leading human-influenced cause of dead birds. As a society, we should act to conserve wildlife and preserve natural areas for future generations. A Smithsonian study on catbirds in suburban Maryland documented that 79% of young catbirds were killed primarily by cats before reaching adulthood. We should not accept the release of any cats in Anne Arundel County. Cats should be managed the same way as dogs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bishop. Appreciate it. Thank you. Did we get everybody? Thank you. I have three more names, and then we'll have 3 seats if anybody else wants to contribute. Tracy Powson, Inga Peters, and Keith Burnham.
I've already testified, sir.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you very much. Got your name down twice, excuse me. Is there anybody else that wants to come on up now at this time, if you would, please? And if there's anybody else, we have, I think we're going to have still one more seat, I see. Anybody else want to have a final word? Okay, thank you. Tracy Powson, please.
Do I have to turn this on myself?
No, she'll get it for you. There you go.
Hi, my name is Tracy Powelson. I live in Davidsonville. As a reminder of my testimony last month, I managed a large mixed-use property here in Anne Arundel County that successfully implemented a community cat program to reduce the overall at-large cat population. I think that everybody here is saying that they want to reduce the cat population. The cats are already out there. So with regard to the birds, this is just another tool in animal control's toolbox to reduce the population of the cats. The cats are already out there killing birds. This is just one more instrument that they can use. I encourage you to vote yes for the bill as it was presented last month. The bill focuses on the goal of reducing the number of unfixed cats reproducing in the wild, as well as the reduction of intakes at animal control. From a business standpoint, please allow Anne Arundel County to be a best practice leader on this issue, like many other neighboring jurisdictions. Please pass a bill that will not present barriers to volunteers and will create a positive cost-saving partnership between Anne Arundel County and the many volunteers and groups with the same goal in mind. Please pass a bill that won't deter volunteers and will allow citizens of Anne Arundel County to experience the successful outcome that this program is capable of achieving. I know that in the case of the property that I manage, we would not have had the same outcome with barriers present. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Powson. Thank you very much. Ms. Peters, Inga Peters?
Yes, my name is
Good
Inga
evening.
Peters.
She'll get it for you there. There you go.
Thank you. My name is Inga Peters, and I run a rescue on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. I have been rescuing cats for several years, and we just organized this last year. There are individuals that put out data out there but have no other solution, no other answers. Their argument is that cats should not be outside because they kill other animals. What about the other animals that are outside that are killing animals? The eagles and the hawks that kill other birds, fox. Just this week, driving down Route 8, watched an eagle swoop down and pick up a goose. So there are other animals out there that are doing the exact same thing that they're accusing the cats of doing. I have watched cats in my colonies eating next to other birds. And if they are cared for and they are fed, that is not their primary food. Misinformation costs millions of cats their lives every year, including cats that are just displaced that once belonged to a family. We need to educate people on the truth about community cats, feral cats, and about the false claims so we can stop killing them. Millions of cats live outside and always have, always will. Their home is outdoors, just like the squirrels, chipmunks, and birds. They are well suited to their outdoor home. Did you know that just 70 years ago, few cats lived entirely indoors at all? In fact, more than 10,000 years ago, cats have lived outdoor lives sharing the environment with birds and wildlife. Understanding cats' place in history will help us understand why TNR isn't so bad. As far as the main threats to wildlife, leading biologists and environmentalists will say that human-led activities, including climate change, habitat destruction, and development, are far away more the #1 cause.
Thank you, Ms. Peters. Appreciate it very much. We have, let's go with you, ma'am, okay? Sure. Next.
My name's Suzanne Gall. I testified before. I've been now working to get this problem attention and get some resolution for 5 years, the last 3 with Bob Root and some of these people you've talked to. I need to speak to a couple of the comments made. First, about the cats being able to be TNR'd on important bird areas or environmentally sensitive areas. That is not true. First off, you can only do TNR with the property owner's permission. So if the property owner does not give you permission, TNR does not happen there. The state of Maryland, when they examined this many years ago, Secretary of State Bartenfelder said that TNR can happen on people's property with that property manager's permission, and it should not be done in important bird areas or environmentally safe areas. If there are cats there, then the county or whoever owns that property should be doing something about it. Okay? Second is the Department of Health in Anne Arundel County told us 2 years ago that this is better than doing nothing. If we don't have TNR, then is the county going to start dedicating resources to remove these cats? Are they going to go out into the field? Are they going to work with the people that don't have the money to spay and neuter? Are they going to do something? Are they going to start enforcing the abandonment laws? Because if they don't, and we don't pass this, then we will have the same problem over again. We've got to do something different. I'm probably the most neutral person you're ever going to talk to about this. I have met with Gerald, I have met with Barbara, I have met with the different government agencies. I was involved in Hillsmere. When the cats, as Alice said, are fixed, they stop creating problems. And people still can get a trap today. We are not removing the other solution. Thank you for your patience.
And now you've met with us. Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony. Sir.
Yes, my name is Gerald Weingrad, and I live in Annapolis at 1328 Washington Drive. I was a state senator and worked with conservation groups throughout my whole adult life, and I'm a wildlife conservation advocate who also owned cats for most of his life in protecting my mother's cat after she died, that died at 17, lived with me. We all agree, everyone here, there's a severe cat overpopulation problem caused by humans. We all agree that cats and dogs should be neutered and vaccinated against diseases regularly. Where the disagreement occurs is that we can't put cats over all other animals, and that cats should not be allowed outdoors. The native cat is not a native cat. The domestic cat, Felis catus, is an introduced non-native animal that's invasive. It was bred by the Egyptians, before that in Asia, and it was introduced by the colonists only 300 or 400 years ago. Native species do not have the ecological ability to resist these cats yet in evolution. So actually drawing an analogy to bald eagles, grizzly bears, any other predator that are native is totally false. And there are at least 80 million, maybe 100 million free-roaming cats in this country because of humans. So the solution is absolutely neuter, trap, and vaccinate, adopt. And where they can't be adopted, they need to be euthanized humanely. Even PETA, the most strong animal rights group, completely agrees, and they agree that trap, neuter, and release is not effective in reducing cat populations. I've given all of you the studies. I know I was a legislator myself. You don't have time to read them, but at least look at the abstract from the best vets and the best masters and PhDs in public health at the Center for Disease Control that concluded it is not effective at reducing animal-borne disease from cats or in reducing cat population.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I would like to just give you this picture of, these are not fake, of cats killing birds.
Thank you. We will take it. Thank you very much, Senator, and I appreciate your testimony very, very much. Sir.
Christopher Jimenez, Broadneck in your district, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to say that, first of all, thank you for being here and listening to all of us. I know it's a little exhausting, but this bill needs to pass. It's very logic. It's very foreign to the county. PETA does not have any headquarters here in Anne Arundel County because the people of Anne Arundel County don't want a controversial group that euthanizes not only feral animals but adoptable animals in the thousands. We don't want that here. That's why we don't have it here. And, you know, it is a human-caused issue, but just like the Chincoteague ponies and the Assateague ponies out in Ocean City, you know, how the federal government takes care of them and the Mustangs are taking care out in the West, we need to do something in Anne Arundel County to take care of the cats that our residents have unfortunately caused overpopulation, and we can do it. A lot of the people that get help are people that are hoarding sometimes and with mental disease. Instead of bullying them and calling them crazy cat people, we need to come up with a solution, and we can do that effectively. So I hope that we can pass this piece of legislation, and thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Just a point of personal privilege. Dr. McDonough, are you still here? Would you, Dr. McDonough, would you come down for you folks are dismissed. Thank you very much. I just want to ask one quick question. Thank you. Would you just briefly, and it's just a few seconds, can you address this issue of the point was made here that animals fight with animals and animals devour animals, and that's the way it is. But then there's this issue that cats are not wild animals. They are domestic. In other words, they're an extension of man that's been put into the wild theater, if you will. I'm not going to use the right terminology, but can you extol about the validity of that argument?
This is my understanding of the problem. We have unowned cats out there in the environment. They are not suitable as pets. If they're trapped, neutered, and then tried to be housed in your home, they will not make suitable pets.
Okay.
They are just not, and we call them feral cats. They're not truly feral the way foxes are feral. They're cats that are not house cats. They started out as house cats, but when people have a cat that gets pregnant, they sometimes kick them out.
Right.
The situation we all agree is that if we could treat cats the way we treat dogs, there are no dogs running around. If you have a dog running around, you call animal control and the dog is gone. If it bites, it's killed. If it doesn't bite, it gets a new home.
Why doesn't that work with cats?
Because there are something like 80 million of them running around America. I don't remember the number. Someone else had the number. And what we have found, and I don't have the data in front of me, but what we have found is that the managed colonies where they're trapped, neutered, and returned to the colony, and the caretaker continues feeding those cats, the colony no longer grows. They're not having kittens, and they're not fighting.
So are these colonies that we're hearing about, are they diminishing and evaporating?
Diminishing in size, except for, and I see this every day practically because I work every day, we have people who bring cats from their colonies. Oh, look what showed up at my colony. Here's another cat. I wonder where it's from. It's obviously a house cat. It's pregnant or in heat or about to become in heat, or it's a tomcat that is just about starting to spray around. People dump them. And if those cats are not spayed and neutered, it just contributes to the problem. It's like the drug problem in humans. I don't have a solution for it, but the best solution, I believe, is the trap, neuter, return. It also gives the opportunity when we get our hands on the cats, the ones that are not tame, that are not homeable, are the ones that are returned to the wild. The other ones are the rescue groups are incredibly effective. The rescue groups find homes for all of these homeable cats.
Well, I thank you again. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you very much, and thank you all. Where are we? That concludes the public hearing. Is there any, Madam Secretary, excuse me, Mr. Grasso, did you have?
No, I'm fine.
Mr. Smith?
I'm fine, Mr. Chairman.
I do got one comment, or I guess not clarification, just a observation, if you will. It's interesting because I think generally the audience, everyone here, even those who are for or against it, this isn't a question of
Excuse me, Mr. Smith. Just for the record, I want to close the public hearing.
Go ahead, please. Please close it.
The public hearing is closed. Please go ahead.
All right. So the trap and the neutering, it seems no one has an issue with, from what I've been able to decipher amongst over the last few weeks. It's the returning piece that apparently where there seems to be some sort of disagreement, if you will. And it's interesting because I was in my head, I'm saying, well, what do we do with the cats that are not returned? And so that's certainly a solution that the county would probably try to resolve, but I'm not sure what that answer would be anyway. But it was just interesting to note that of the trap and the neuter, that everyone is in agreement with that, including the bird folks. Is that correct? Correct. The trap and the okay. I was just curious. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anything, Mr. Grasso? Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 9617 as amended.
Bill number 9617 as amended, an ordinance concerning public safety, animal control, community cats.
Any further discussion? Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Grasso.
Aye.
Mr. Fink.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Aye.
Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Peruka.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill 9617 as amended is passed.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 9717. Let me ask you to pause, Madam Secretary. As you folks are leaving the room here, please do so in an orderly way because we still have business to attend to. Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 9717.
Bill 9717, an ordinance concerning Public Works Pike Drive water petition excess front foot benefit assessment.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Marzik.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, Bernie Marzik, the County Executive's Office, with me at the table, Karen Henry and Leslie Campbell from Department of Public Works, as well as Nancy Duden, County Attorney. Bill 9717 approves a front foot benefit assessment in excess of the maximum rate set by the county code for the Pike Drive water project in Riva. The rate to make the project self-sustaining is higher than the maximum in the code. The majority of the property owners within this project's defined area submitted petitions indicating a desire and ability to pay the front foot rate of $13.32. I believe you'll be hearing from some of those folks today. They contacted me, but we'd be happy to answer any questions that the council has.
Any questions?
Mr.
Mr. Trumbauer.
I missed where is Pike Drive?
In Riva.
Riva.
Yes.
That's Council District 7.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's down kind of across roughly from the post office off Riva Road.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Now I'll open the public hearing then on Bill 9717. Do we have any points on it? I don't seem to have a sign-up sheet for 9717, but we'll go forward. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
And thank you for your patience waiting through the long evening. Who would like to go first? Yes, sir. Name and address, please.
Yes, thank you. My name is Ken Gossett, and I strongly support 9717. Excuse me. Now, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
My name is Ken Gossett, and I strongly support 9717. The majority of the homeowners on Pike Drive voted for the 1332 front foot assessment, which qualified the program to move forward. Considerable time and effort has been extended by many of the Pike Drive owners and county employees over several years attempting to bring this project in fruition. It is therefore very important that we pass this bill. Speaking for myself, I have lived on Pike Drive since 1975, and I am now pushing the limits of my existing well. Passing this bill will allow the main water project to continue into construction and therefore provide safe, dependable, and abundant supply of water for all the residents of Pike Drive.
Thank you, sir.
I respectfully ask for your vote in affirmative.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
My name is Wayne Davis. I reside at 3054 Pike Drive. And all of the, or not all, but the majority of the petitioners have approved the rate of 1332. And this is a very much needed project for our community. Our wells are old. We have iron that is unheard of. Some of the wells, well, I just started.
No, that wasn't the bell. That wasn't the bell.
Okay.
Although you've given me a great idea for the future.
But anyway, our wells are really bad. They're right on the edge. I myself replaced my well pump a year and a half ago, and there's so much iron in the water that it actually wears the pump out. So the quality of water is bad. We have to all have water treatment units. The chemicals are expensive, and they're costly, and we wish that you would approve this bill to increase the assessment above the county code limit.
Thank you, sir. Can I ask you said that there was a majority. How many homeowners are affected?
27 on this petition.
And
it was just the Pike Drive.
How many were voted for it?
15.
Okay.
56%.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Any other comments? Seeing none.
Actually, Mr. Chair, just before we vote and end this, I was looking over the auditor's blue letter, and she points out that the rate in the bill is the maximum rate. So but the county will charge the actual cost. So it may be, it may be less than the 1332, which would be great for you guys. So I just wanted to get that on the record.
We hope it does.
Yeah, I'll bet.
It'll be based on bid cost, and the project is due for bid opening on January 30th.
Very good.
So then
Thank
we'll
you.
find out.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Trumbauer. Ms. Foster.
Yeah, okay, I got a new name now.
Madam Auditor, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to point out the rate goes down, but the user connection fee has also gone up in the meantime, so they'll be paying more user connection fees. So I'm not sure whether they'll come out ahead or not, but I just wanted to put that on the record.
Okay.
We need this project.
Thank you, and thank you for your testimony, gentlemen. We'll conclude the public hearing. Any other discussion? Excuse me, Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 9717.
Bill 9717, an ordinance concerning Public Works Pike Drive Water Petition Excess Front Foot Benefit Assessment.
Any other discussion? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill 9717.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Grasso?
Aye.
Mr. Fink?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer?
Aye.
Mr. Walker?
Aye.
Mr. Pruka?
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 9717 is passed.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title of Bill number 9817.
Bill number 9817, an ordinance concerning Kensington Special Community Benefit District.
Thank you. Mr. Marzick?
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, Bernie Marzick in the County Executive's Office with me at the table, Kinley Bray from the Office of Law, and Tommy Adebu from Budget Office. Bill 9817 establishes the Kensington Special Community Benefit District. The purposes of this district is for maintaining and improving community property, providing insect and pest control, and necessary insurance coverages for the community. We'd be happy to answer any questions the council has.
Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Trumbauer?
Can you tell me where Kensington
I think
District
it's up in
is?
Severna Park, I believe. Yes.
Very good, thank you.
And a lovely street it is.
No?
Yes.
Other district. Any further questions? We'll now open the public hearing. I don't have a sign-up sheet. Is anybody seeing the movement? I'll close the public hearing. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 9817.
Bill number 9817, an ordinance concerning Kensington Special Community Benefit District.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, Madam Auditor, did you ever receive a response on whether the language you identified was duplicative and doesn't matter?
Yes, the language is duplicative, but it ended up that duplicative language was in their petition, and the Office of Law has told us that it needs to be worded exactly like the petition.
Okay.
You know, we do look at petitions ahead of time, so I don't know what happened with this one, but in the future, I guess.
Doesn't cause any...
It doesn't cause any problem.
Okay.
No.
Very good, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Trumbauer. Any other discussion? Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll on Bill 9817?
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Grasso?
Aye.
Mr. Fink?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer?
Aye.
Mr. Walker?
Aye.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 9817 is passed.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title of Bill 9917.
Bill number 9917, an ordinance concerning subdivision and development, adequate public school facilities, school utilization chart.
Thank you. Mr. Marzick?
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, Bernie Marzick, the County Executive's Office, with me at the table, Greg Swain from the Office of Law, Phil Hager, Planning and Zoning Officer, and Alex Shiknovich from the Anne Arundel County Public Schools. Bill 9917 is the annual approval of the school utilization chart, which has been updated by Planning and Zoning based on the 2019 projected enrollment in the schools. The chart is based on the information provided by the board to Planning and Zoning. We'd be happy to answer any questions the council has.
Yes, Mr. Trumbauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's obviously another school bill under consideration that we amended and will be coming back that could impact this. So if we were to pass this today and that bill, Mr. Grasso's bill in some form passed and would affect this, would we then do a subsequent bill, or is this our one shot for the year?
Greg Swain from the Office of Law. The bill that we're looking at now, 9917, is an annual bill.
Yeah.
So if it passes today,
That's it.
the next bill, which would come up in November, would incorporate the new code changes if Bill 9217 passes.
Does anyone at the panel have an opinion on whether the council should delay this until there's resolution on that other bill? No, it's two separate things?
It's two separate things, because Bill 9217 is the annual, this bill, 9917, is the annual school chart bill, and the code requires the planning and zoning officer to bring that to council no later than November 30th of every year.
Right.
That's what this bill is.
No, I understand.
So if
But this bill is based on 100%.
Right, if 9217 passes,
Yeah.
that would apply to the next school chart.
Oh, regardless of this, it can't
Yes.
apply to this one?
Yes.
If we had passed it 2 weeks ago, would it apply?
I don't think so, no.
Oh,
Because
okay.
it's an annual requirement.
So you're telling me we should vote on this?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hager. It's late in the night and simple answers are appreciated,
great
but thank you,
non-answer.
Mr. Swain, for explaining that. Okay.
Anything else? Then we'll now open the public hearing. Seeing no movement in the audience, we'll close the public hearing. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 9917.
Bill 9917, an ordinance concerning subdivision and development, adequate public school facilities, school utilization chart.
Is there any more discussion? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill 9917.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Grasso.
Aye.
Mr. Fink.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Aye.
Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Peruka.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill 9917 is passed.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title of Resolution Number 5717.
Resolution number 5717, resolution approving the reappointments of members to the Severn River Commission.
Mr. Marsden.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, Bernie Marsden, the County Executive's Office, with the table Greg Swain, Office of Law. Resolution 5717 reappoints Charles Crater, Sarah Phillips, Arthur Burney Jr., and Daniel Roach to the Severn River Commission.
Thank you. Any discussion? We'll open the public hearing. Seeing no movement, we'll close the public hearing. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Resolution 5717.
Resolution 5717, resolution approving the reappointment of members to the Severn River Commission.
Any further discussion? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Resolution 5717.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Grasso.
Aye.
Mr. Fink.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Aye.
Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Peruka.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Resolution 5717 is adopted.
Is there any other business to be brought before the County Council?
Move to adjourn, Mr. Chair.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. County Council is adjourned until January 16, 2018.
Good job.